A renowned champion is, in simpler terms, an all-powerful sovereign believed to have reigned supreme during a specific era. Among them were those who could instill fear with the mere mention of their name. One ruler established an empire, while another led a vast organization. Since time immemorial, there have existed those whose stories resonated through the ages. Conquerors of the Demon King, healers of afflictions who saved innumerable lives. Conversely, some charted a different course, fixated solely on attaining absolute power. Davey's position was far from content. Despite his tender age of 10, he was subjected to intense training and met with physical reprimands for any deviations from the hero's preferences. Surviving these ordeals only ensured he'd eventually face even more daunting challenges, akin to being cast into a pit of fire. Rationalized as necessary for his own good, these experiences etched scars on his soul. Soon, he would bid farewell to both these internal wounds and the Hall of Heroes, the very place that confined him. Certain female heroes expressed reluctance at his departure, citing his lingering weakness and pondering whether prolonging his trial by fire might have been wiser. When Davey addressed them as Grandma, acknowledging their millennia-long existence, one named Daphne took offense. She moved menacingly toward him, poised to strike, yet the intervention of her companions quelled her mounting fury. Davey turned to face them, and everyone, including Daphne, bid him farewell, urging him not to forget them throughout his life. With a final wave from the heroes, Davey stepped into a bright light, and then darkness enveloped him momentarily. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a large room, lying on a sickbed with an IV attached to his hand. His body felt different, and he realized he couldn't move easily. Even his efforts to open his eyes proved futile, leaving him to sigh and resign himself to stillness. He had returned, finding himself in the body of the forsaken and feeble prince. His gaze settled on a grand painting of his family hanging on the wall. His attention focused on the boy standing beside his father, Davey Al Round himself. The Round Kingdom was situated on the eastern part of the Taiwanese continent. He, now back in the role of the first son, belonged to the feeble king of an insignificant realm. The realization of his rebirth into this existence brought a measure of happiness. As a prince, he could relish a life of luxury, in stark contrast to his past. But then reality struck him anew. He was weak and couldn't move. Davey pondered why he had been so naive in his previous life. He once believed that his happiness would endure indefinitely. Living in a peaceful world, he had been oblivious to his circumstances as a prince, a concealed danger. It hadn't occurred to him that being royalty marked him as a perpetual target for enemies. The grim reality was that weakness could lead to exile from his own family. At present, his focus is on regaining control of his body. The other challenges could be tackled in due course. He stood prepared to confront everyone, armed with a body that had been honed by a millennium of heroes' training. In a distant memory, Davey recalled a moment when he sat atop a hill, tears streaming down his face. Someone approached him, and he gazed at them with a mixture of resentment and sorrow. A man bearing a lion's head settled a short distance behind him, acknowledging that he had heard about Davey's predicament. The man noted how Davey had endured a rather intense beating, turning it into quite a spectacle. Amusement laced his words as he laughed, prompting Davey to reproach him. Davey expressed that while the man was free to mock him, he hadn't spoken any lies. It was the heroes who had initially welcomed him with open arms, only to become disillusioned by his inadequacy. They had regarded him as insignificant, akin to a mere bug. Davey experienced discomfort in those moments, but was too afraid to say anything. Davey said that the man was oblivious to Davey's growing frustration, unaware of how utterly fed up he was. After all, Davey hadn't chosen to be here. Circumstances had led him down this path. The lion-headed man speculated that the heroes might have been taken aback by reality, their egos struggling to digest it. Deep down, they likely knew the truth. Davey scoffed at this, questioning the very essence of heroism. The man mused that defining heroism was a perpetual quest for them. Suddenly, with one hand, he hoisted Davey up in the air, urging him to cheer up. The man had decided to extend a helping hand to Davey, recognizing that laughing at his circumstances wasn't justified. Bringing Davey close to his lion head, he proclaimed that he would shoulder the burden as they were now family. Introducing himself as Hercules, a survival expert, he vowed to train Davey's body from that day forward. He suggested they make an effort to get along, united by their new bond. In the present, Davey wakes up and gazes around at his surroundings, the familiar room, confirming his return. He releases a sigh, the realization settling in. In a room nestled within the vast expanse of the castle, Davey lies alone. His mind wanders, pondering the passage of time since he woke up. As the door opens, a figure enters. This person, the sole caretaker who has tended to him during his entire stay, happens to be a single maid. Davey finds little surprise in the fact that no other visitors have come, considering his prolonged state of unconsciousness. Yet, the notion of only a single maid's presence fails to elicit much joy. Swiftly, he reminds himself to consider it a blessing that at least one person extends their care towards him. Once the maid departs, Davey musters his strength to sit up, acknowledging that his movements are still limited. Nonetheless, he manages to rise to his feet, albeit unsteadily. With a purpose in mind, he reaches for the calendar on his bedside table, wanting to confirm the date. As his gaze fixes on the calendar, he discovers that it's the 278th day of Baldus. The arrow that had struck him in the woods, a memory etched in his mind, had occurred 6 years ago. The weight of this realization ignites a surge of fury within him. The thought of going back to his former powerless state is intolerable. In order to prevent that, swift recovery is necessary. Contemplating his next steps, he raises his hand and clenches his fingers into a determined fist. He attempts to channel his mana, his magical energy, concentrating it in his palm as if to conjure a spell. However, his efforts prove fruitless. No magical power emerges. Staring blankly at his palm, a mixture of shock and panic sets in. Within a stone chamber, Daphne once shared a revelation with Davey. She told her that his allocation of holy power was rather average. She had emphasized that this wasn't necessarily a drawback, as he could still excel at wielding this unique energy. Davey, skeptical of her words, responded with disbelief, accusing her of trying to deceive him. He assumed she was attempting to coerce him into performing menial tasks around the temple. Holy power is the divine energy bestowed by a deity presiding over purity and well-being. It was a privilege granted solely to those who held the deity's favor. Daphne, Davey's instructor in these matters, was recognized by the community as a devout follower of the deity. Despite possessing a considerable amount of holy power, she had embarked on the journey of mastering its utilization independently. Over hundreds of years, her unwavering dedication paved the way for her to wield holy power to an exceptional degree. Davey, following suit, had gained access to a significant portion of this power, thanks in part to her guidance. However, in the present scenario, Davey finds himself unable to tap into any of this power. The underlying issue lies in his body's stiffness, a result of 6 years of disuse. He harbors concerns about potentially squandering the hard-earned experience he had gained in his previous life by returning to this vessel. Nevertheless, he takes solace in the knowledge that a substantial portion of his accumulated experience has safely accompanied his soul. Still, just as the act of standing has proven challenging with this new body, he anticipates a prolonged period before he can fully harness his true strength once again. Struggling fervently, Davey attempts to rekindle his powers, even his most fundamental healing ability. Yet, each try yields no results. While he would typically give up in such situations, his current determination compels him to persist. Once more, he tries to reignite his abilities, and suddenly, a burst of golden light erupts, accompanied by the appearance of wings. His delight surges as he successfully restores his powers through an energetic burst. A fleeting instant later, he lowers his legs to the floor. He carefully regains his balance, rejoicing in his accomplishment. Initiating a cautious walk, he takes deliberate, measured steps, one hand pressed against the wall for support. In this moment, he acknowledges that he has essentially reclaimed his holy power. As for the remainder of his skills, he reasons that they can be regained once he attains full recovery. Guiding himself to the balcony, he gazes out over the city encompassed by the fortress walls. He's struck by the realization that it's been a long time since he last laid eyes on the sun. Fueled by excitement, Davey extends his arms upward, expressing his gratitude and delight in the sun's warm embrace. His reverie is disrupted by a sudden shattering sound. Behind him stands the maid, fragments of a broken object strewn at her feet. Trembling and astonished, she witnesses her prince standing, having emerged from his coma. With urgency, she rushes toward him, and he, in turn, kneels on the ground, engulfed by a wave of regret at being discovered. Before long, the royal physician, Ramses, stands at Davey's side, conducting an examination with his stethoscope. He comments on the surprisingly favorable condition of Davey's body. Taking a seat, Ramses inquires if there are any ailments that might have eluded his notice. Davey replies, indicating he's simply tired. The doctor turns thoughtful. In days past, Davey wouldn't have fathomed being so rude to an elder. He doesn't like it, yet he comprehends the role he currently occupies. He is a member of the Round family, the ruling lineage of the most inconsequential realm, as well as the son of Lenny Alishard and the reigning first prince of the nation. A regally attired woman adorned with jewelry and a crown enters the room, commending Davey's resilience. Davey regards her with an impassive expression, recognizing her as Linus Barriet, the individual who poisoned his mother to ascend the throne as queen. Her children, second Prince Carlos and third Prince Benedict, trail behind her. Linus inquires if Davey had seen the identity of the assailant who shot the arrow that plunged him into a 6-year-long coma. Davey responds uncertainly, explaining that the arrow seemed to materialize out of thin air. In a tone tinted with hope, he probes further, asking if the culprit has been apprehended. Davey's gaze shifts to Carlos, a smirk curling his lips as he comments that targeting him with an arrow was evidently an assassination attempt against a prince. His thoughts turn to what kind of punishment awaits the perpetrator. Carlos' face contorts in horror, his expression fraught with intense stress. Linus interjects, informing Davey that the case has been closed. Davey meets her gaze with an unwavering stare, withholding any immediate response. Subsequently, the doctor, Ramses, rises from his examination and assures Davey that he's done all that he can. Davey is advised to summon a priest for treatment if needed, and he is told he should be fully recovered in a matter of days. Davey expresses gratitude, and Ramses takes his leave, guided out by the maid. Watching their departure, Linus addresses Davey, suggesting that his death might have been preferable. Nonchalantly, Davey reclines on the bed, inquiring if she's disheartened that an annoyance like him has managed to survive. Carlos interjects with mockery, deriding the supposed first prince for succumbing to an attack and falling into a coma, deeming him a disgrace to the kingdom. However, Linus departs, gesturing for Carlos and Benedict to follow. Once they leave, Davey lifts his hand, looking at his palm, where faint spots of energy appear. He realizes he's been employing holy magic all along, yet it appears to have gone unnoticed by others, likely due to the discrepancy in their power levels. He sinks back onto the bed, gazing at the ceiling, deep in thought. Linus Barriet, hailing from the influential Barriet dukedom, is the eldest daughter. Davey had harbored a desire to end her and Carlos, yet upon encountering them face to face, his emotions weren't as intense. Perhaps his temper has mellowed through his training at the temple. Nonetheless, revenge remains on his agenda. For now, he opts to take a more relaxed approach and focus on his recovery. Gazing toward the balcony, he contemplates what his first meal following his awakening will be. After cutting his hair, Davey has engaged in rigorous workouts, utilizing furniture as makeshift exercise equipment to enhance his stamina. It has been 2 weeks since he rekindled his holy power, a period he found rather uneventful. His primary focus involved maintaining the flow of both his holy power and mana, which in turn facilitated his swift physical recovery. While he could have healed through the use of holy magic alone, he benefited from the insights of a necromancer versed in human anatomy as well as the medical knowledge imparted by He, the divine doctor. These combined resources made the healing process relatively straightforward. Davey effortlessly cleanses himself with a mere flick of his finger, marveling at the inherent convenience of magic. Soon after, the maid named Amy makes her appearance, bearing his meal. Although he had anticipated a proper repast, the fact that he's still being treated as an old patient results in him receiving another serving of gruel. Davey voices his displeasure, prompting Amy's apologetic response that her actions align with the doctor's directives. Swiftly downing the initial portion, Davey demands an additional 5 servings, later revising the request to 10. Amy regards him with some reluctance, hesitating to meet his request. Though Davey's stomach feels close to bursting, his accelerated digestion thanks to the restore ability makes it seem as if his soul is reuniting with his body after each meal. The only downside is that his rapid digestion necessitates frequent relief. Later, wearing glasses, Davey pores over a parchment, engrossed in its scrutiny. He comes across an unprecedented dilemma. He lifts his gaze, and Amy's voice chimes in with apologies. Davey reassures her that the matter isn't her fault and returns his attention to the parchment, which seems to be a bill. The realization that the palace is scrutinizing the first prince's consumption strikes Davey as rather absurd. The source of this issue seems clear to him. He queries Amy about the number of maids, attendants, and servants within the palace. Her hesitation in responding leads Davey to deduce that she is the sole staff member. This palace isn't the king's abode, but has hosted numerous princes in the past. The entire responsibility of managing the palace has been entrusted to this lone young maid. Davey privately acknowledges the spectacle of returning to this scenario. Though he may have lacked certain privileges in his youth, worries about food never plagued him. Upon inquiring about their budget, Amy discloses that they receive a yearly allocation of 6,000 gold, yet their current holdings amount to just 10 gold. Davey delves further, asking about their monthly funding. He opines that even with limited resources, careful financial planning should prevent food shortages. According to the records, they should have received 500 gold, yet the actual sum is less than 100. Davey entertains suspicions of embezzlement. His query extends to Amy's own salary, which prompts a hesitant reply indicating she receives approximately a third of the stipulated amount. The revelation takes Davey aback, leading him to realize that while Amy is kind-hearted, she's also rather naive. In the world of nobility, maids are considered possessions of the aristocracy. Amy herself is the offspring of a baron. Her role as a maid was initially the result of a minor error, but she took on responsibilities that were typically assigned to lower-ranking servants. For the past 6 years, she has managed Davey's palace single-handedly, even dipping into her own earnings to do so. After putting pen to parchment, Davey instructs Amy to claim the portion of his income she didn't receive. Bewildered, she attempts to voice her objection, but Davey's stern demeanor leaves no room for negotiation. Inquiring about their food supply for the following day, she admits there's none available. When she addresses him formally as Prince, Davey expresses his aversion to the title, finding it too distant. Despite her protest, he insists that being addressed as Prince creates a barrier between them. The realization that there's at least one person who stands by his side brings Davey comfort. Accompanied by Amy, Davey stands outside the Royal Financial Office, prepared to manage his own finances. He remarks on the continued absence of his father, even in this situation. Amy's shocked glance prompts a wry comment from Davey about whether he should have refrained from saying that aloud. He muses that if the Queen had overheard, it would likely have triggered a significant commotion. While Amy hesitates, Davey emphasizes that he'll proceed without her if she remains distracted. His father's inaction during his mother's poisoning has led Davey to distance himself from him, no longer regarding him as a father figure. Moving forward with the aid of a walking stick, Davey sets off down the corridor, prompting Amy's offer to guide him. Meeting her gaze, Davey makes a request for her to take care of him. The man in the tailcoat twirls his mustache as he declares the impossibility of utilizing already allocated funds. Before him, Davey finds himself irked by the man's rather bothersome facial hair. Surveying the financial department, where individuals are scattered along the staircase, Davey's suspicions appear justified. They seem to be looking down on him. He collapses onto a sofa with an audible thud, prompting the man's sharp attention. Emitting a sigh, Davey proceeds to question the man candidly, inquiring if he's deliberately toying with him. The man meets his gaze with a blank expression. Davey, in a direct manner, points out that while they're entitled to receive 500 gold, they're being shortchanged by 100 gold. The man provides an explanation, saying this discrepancy stems from the deductions required to maintain the castle. Even nobles from other domains are following Davey's fiscal policies. However, Davey interrupts, expressing his growing frustration and demanding to know why the castle he's overseeing exhibits cracked floors and overgrown weeds. He highlights the neglected state of the garden and the impending collapse of the hills. Davey challenges the man to account for this situation. As whispers ripple through the department, the man's anger begins to flare. Seated upright on the sofa, Davey squares his shoulders, anticipating the forthcoming excuse from the man. As the man begins to speak, his tension is palpable. He explains that the use of the maintenance fund falls outside the financial department's jurisdiction. He adds that while Davey's agitation is noted, this is a place for budget management, not a platform for his monetary demands. With a resolute hand placed on his knee, Davey startles the man momentarily. He glances at Amy and informs her that he's concluded the conversation and wishes to depart. Inquiring whether he's heading to the maintenance department, the man receives a response from Davey as he approaches the door. Davey is fairly certain the situation there will be no different. He predicts that the man will likely shift the blame to someone else as a delay tactic. The man's eyes widen when Davey straightforwardly instructs him to put the money he received in his pocket to some use. As Davey navigates the castle's hallways and corridors, he remarks that the premises seem to be reasonably well maintained. He speculates that his servants must flee in the face of the disdain of the nobles. However, they still ensure they're paid in full. All the while, the burden largely falls on Amy's shoulders. Davey addresses Amy, requesting that she retrieve a sword. Caught off guard by the unexpected request, Amy trembles with apprehension. Davey swiftly reassures her that he has no intentions of using it to harm anyone. He chuckles to lighten the atmosphere, and Amy agrees to fetch the requested item. As Amy walks away, Davey comes to a halt before an expansive painting. His intentions don't involve harming individuals. Rather, he contemplates taking action against those who barely qualify as humans. Given his precarious situation, he ponders the potential consequences of recklessly targeting both servants and nobles without a justifiable reason. The answer is clear. He would be branded insane, resulting in an overwhelming vote to promptly exile the prince. Such a scenario would be unacceptable to him. Davey is determined not to become prey for the corrupt nobility. After successfully hunting a boar, Davey finds Amy's horrified expression behind him. He nonchalantly remarks that the boar just happened to be in front of the castle. Lowering himself beside the boar, he requests a plate and a waterproofing agent from Amy. In reality, Davey had captured the boar himself, but he decided to go along with the lie. As he touches the lifeless animal, Amy rushes to him in a state of panic. Puzzled by her actions, Davey questions her, prompting a tearful response from Amy. She can't bear the thought of the prince's hands being stained with the blood of an animal. Her concern extends to the possibility of him hurting himself again. Davey reassures her that no one is watching and confidently wields the dagger in his grasp. In the subsequent instant, he delivers a decisive strike to the boar, embarking on the task of processing it. Even if Davey were inclined to meet the king, political matters would likely lead to his denial. The state of other departments is also beyond his control. Queen Linus appears to be exerting her influence to thwart his efforts, but as a student of Hercules and a master of survival techniques, Davey has developed a certain level of expertise. Facing Amy, Davey informs her that the boar will now serve as his dinner. During the evening within the castle, Linus elegantly fans herself as she openly ponders Prince Davey. She notes that the more she contemplates the matter, the more peculiar it seems. His current demeanor doesn't align with her memories of him. Kneeling before her, Sherio, a staff member, offers her perspective, stating that Davey is currently a patient. According to the priests, the first prince can barely walk at the moment. Given the circumstances, a year's time may be necessary for his full recovery. Linus inquires whether there's any possibility that Sherio's informant might be mistaken. Placing her fan beneath her chin, Linus mockingly asserts that despite Sherio's status as an A-class informant for the Dark Moon, she remains nothing more than an A-class maid in Linus's presence. The Dark Moon is an assassin's guild situated in the capital of Round. While Linus doesn't doubt Sherio's abilities, she's unable to shake off an unsettling feeling she gets from her. Despite the king's abandonment and the 6 years that have passed, the first prince's situation appears unaltered, just as Sherio stated. His life remains within her grasp, as it's meant to be. However, a sense of unease persists, hinting at something beneath the surface. Remaining in a kneeling position, Sherio stands her ground and informs Linus that her comrades, regardless of their class, behave with dignity, and she won't tolerate any insult directed at them. Linus, initially taken aback, swiftly adopts a sweet demeanor, stating that she was merely expressing her concerns. In response, Sherio asserts her capability to thwart Davey's plans at any moment. Linus warns her that if matters don't align with her statement, Sherio will face the consequences. Intentionally spilling tea from the cup she had just picked up from the table, Linus comments on the tea's poor quality. With that, she dismisses Sherio. Linus privately contemplates that, regardless of the angle, it's best to eliminate individuals who refuse to obey. Meanwhile, Davey enjoys his dinner in a contented mood, while Amy stands beside him, appearing somewhat flustered. It's akin to threading a needle through a labyrinth of hundreds. The mana navigates the passages, piercing through the tunnels to create a flowing stream. The process is deliberate and painstaking, especially when tackling challenging areas like the veins and the intricacies of the brain. Daphne had stressed the importance of remembering the pathways she taught him if he wished to avoid losing his sight. Daphne, a priestess known for her intoxicating power to part oceans with a mere utterance. A necromancer who assumes the role of a priestess more than the priestess herself, Ro-Ayas, a grand mage whose staff dominates her perception, and the female deity, Sister Hippocrea, also known as Sister Hia. Upon seeing this assembly, Davey inquires whether they'll aid him, recognizing that everyone's presence isn't simply for observation. Sister Hippocrea encourages him to place his trust in them. This is a recollection from his time at the temple, gradually approaching the moment he dreads, the experiment he's determined never to endure again. In the morning, Amy joins him outdoors and inquires about his plans to explore the gardens. Davey welcomes her, remarking on the pleasant weather and how the garden's forest-like appearance now exudes elegance. Expressing his well-being, he asks her to inform him if anyone is looking for him. Davey notices that despite her usual tendency to react strongly to his actions, she's beginning to adjust. While she declines to dine with him, her behavior is an improvement compared to before. He ventures deeper into the garden, settling into a cross-legged position at a chosen spot. Employing his abilities, he establishes an operational zone around him. As he begins channeling his magic, shimmering tendrils of gold swirl around his form. Drawing in the surrounding air, he allows it to rejuvenate his lungs, simultaneously extracting mana from the natural world and exhaling stagnant air. This practice is known as mana breathing, a technique associated with Odin, the deity of magicians. Given the body's finite capacity to store mana, regular training and management are necessary. However, this method accelerates the accumulation of mana that would typically require months to amass, all within a span of a few days. The technique is nothing short of miraculous, and its potential impact on the country could trigger a profound revolution. Nevertheless, he has no intention of divulging this knowledge to the world. It's a feat not easily achievable in any case. Seated within the garden, his mana gently motioning, the natural surroundings seem to sway with the soft breeze. Upon catching sounds emanating from beyond the garden, he rises, convinced that whatever commotion occurs outside is likely orchestrated by the queen. While it has been a while since he had his network of informants, delving into the matter would only invite trouble, so he opts to let it be. As he brushes past the foliage, he contemplates that, conversely, it might prove beneficial if they perceive him as a feeble and unintelligent prince. The distortion field emanating from his mana has allowed him to train undisturbed, leading to a significant accumulation of stored mana. With a sigh, he arrives at a temple-like gazebo, realizing it's about time to form that mana circle. Priests are unable to harness magic, and mages are incapable of wielding holy powers. Necromancy, a power bridging both realms, is beyond the reach of either group. Yet, as some might be aware, Davey possesses mastery over all three of these powers, a feat attributed to the temple's two adept individuals. Ordinary mages typically inscribe a circle upon their hearts to access mana. However, this technique proves inadequate for managing the clash between necromancy and holy power. Were Davey to employ this method, the repercussions could prove catastrophic, potentially obliterating his heart. Instead, a bespoke circle tailored to him, known as the artery circle, becomes pivotal. By aligning his arteries throughout his body, he crafts an intricate circle through which he channels mana. This approach enables him to utilize his entire body, including his heart, as a conduit. Not only does this reduce the discord between necromancy and holy power, but it also yields remarkable outcomes. Given its proximity to bodily alteration, a single misstep could prove fatal. That's precisely why he had been against attempting it. In the past, with the aid of the other four girls, he had narrowly managed to succeed. Now, he finds himself anxious about the outcome of this attempt. Within his vision, the ethereal figure of Sister Hippocrea clasps his hands in hers. Observing her and the other spirits, he acknowledges that this approach is uncharacteristic of him. As he witnesses this scene unfold, a tiny, slender rectangle of light materializes between his palms. The prospect of failure doesn't loom as menacingly as enduring another 1,000 years within that temple. With unwavering resolve, he initiates the process, commencing with the manipulation of his blood. Concentrating his energy, he conjures a sphere of crimson light between his hands, the formation of a circle becoming evident. Meanwhile, Amy stands outside the castle, her concern escalating as dinner time sails by and Davey remains absent. He has never skipped a meal, and while he instructed her not to disturb him unless confronted with a significant issue, she's aware that if something untoward happened to him, he wouldn't be able to call for aid. Her voice trembles with anxiety as she contemplates the fate of her prince. Just then, Davey emerges from the surrounding underbrush, gently reminding her to refrain from addressing him as a prince. Relief sweeps over her as she gazes up at him, and as he draws closer, he commends her resilience for waiting despite his previous request. As he nears her, Davey offers a quick apology before mentioning his fatigue, then abruptly loses consciousness, leaving Amy bewildered and concerned. His eyes flutter open, and the chandelier above him comes into focus. A gentle touch on his hand startles him, prompting him to sit up. As he does, he observes Amy peacefully dozing off beside his bed, her hand resting atop his. The memory of suddenly losing consciousness yesterday resurfaces in his mind. The artery circle, the undertaking he had hesitated over, has been successfully completed with flawless precision. The amalgamation of the three powers coursing through his veins now resides within this enigmatic formation. And atop this intricate circle, an additional special effect takes form. A soft breeze wafts in through the window, rousing Amy from her sleep. She awakens to find Davey sitting up, lost in his thoughts. Davey takes satisfaction in the fact that now, with a simple motion of his finger, he can invoke elementary spells, including Restore. 5 months later, on a radiant morning, Amy excitedly displays a bag of herbs to him. However, Davey is content to consume whatever food is available. Since the completion of his artery circle and the stabilization of their lives 3 months ago, provisions in the form of meat and vegetables have begun appearing in his castle. Initially, he suspected it might be a scheme orchestrated by Queen Linus, yet her continuous provision of quality foods seems contrary to her usual behavior. He senses that someone is undoubtedly assisting him, but identifying the benefactor remains a mystery. Amidst this, he senses a distinct presence. To extend his mana throughout the castle to unveil the identity of the newcomers would be effortless, yet he refrains from intruding upon Amy's daily routine. Amy assures Davey that their food situation won't pose a problem, and he instructs her to prepare the herbs while he leaves the garden, informing her that they are expecting guests shortly. Curious about the upcoming visitors, Davey heads towards the castle entrance, where a small group of men has just arrived. These men are priests and Queen Linus's informants. In his bedroom, Davey lies on his bed while the head priest, Boris, examines him. Davey queries Boris about his recovery, to which Boris responds that due to the extended period of Davey's confinement, using holy powers to heal him would be too perilous. Thus, Davey should be grateful for his current state. Davey senses falsehood in the priest's words. He reflects on the individual who, even as a representative priest and envoy of the deity, did not exert his abilities to their full extent and now abandons his responsibilities to simply obey orders. Davey contemplates that Boris should express his thoughts more candidly without the need for sugarcoating. It's not that Boris cannot heal him, rather, he chooses not to. The priest explains that he believed he could easily heal Davey's injuries using the silver gun provided by Priya. However, Davey retorts that his body is actually at the tail end of its recovery. Boris seems to think that Davey doesn't fully comprehend the intricacies of holy power, as its usage and knowledge are reserved exclusively for priests. In Boris's view, Davey should not be so self-centered. He then smiles and suggests that Davey shares similarities with Prince Carlos. This remark triggers outrage from Amy, who chastises Priest Boris for speaking recklessly in front of the prince. Enraged by a maid daring to challenge him, Priest Boris violently strikes Amy across the face. She tumbles to the ground, upsetting a table and knocking over a clock in the process. The priest looms over her, and Davey calls out to him from his bed. Ignoring Davey, Boris asserts that leaving a maid who speaks her mind unchecked would also pose a problem for Davey. He then stoops down beside Amy, holding her chin between his fingers and making unsettling comments about her appearance. Afterward, he straightens up, telling Davey that the examination is concluded and that he will see him again in 15 days. With that, Priest Boris departs, instructing Amy to accompany him out. Davey asks Amy to escort the priest, which she does with a forlorn expression, In a locked room, Boris corners Amy against a wall. He demands that she come to him on her own at night, emphasizing that the prince's life is entirely within his control. Boris dismisses the significance of Amy being a royal maid, stating that Davey's illness has rendered him powerless. A horrified Amy looks up at him, deeply disturbed by his words. Inside the bedroom, where the table and clock remain toppled from Amy's encounter with the priest, Davey senses a strange sensation as his body grows colder. The hallway outside his room begins to crack, but he struggles to put his emotions into words. He considers it might be the result of his simmering rage, but he rejects simplifying it as such due to the dignity he cultivated at the temple. Lady Daphne's teachings echo in his mind, reminding him that his inability to control his anger would make him less than an animal. However, his internal thoughts diverge from this philosophy. He storms out of his room, dragging a sword along with him. Other priests in the hallway react with shock at his appearance, trying to identify the intruder. As he draws nearer, they recognize him as the prince. Davey firmly believes that controlled rage serves as a wellspring of vitality and can also point the way to one's aspirations. While laziness might unlock progress, he regards rage as the propelling force behind it. Taking action, Davey overpowers two priests who try to block his path and continues onward. Meanwhile, Boris maintains his hold on Amy, dismissing her concerns about the assassination of royalty. He disregards her worries, confident that the queen would likely approve of his actions. Boris is convinced that nobody within the kingdom would dare to reprimand him. He sees himself as the queen's instrument, an obedient follower of the benevolent shepherd, Priya. Perched on the windowsill, Davey sneers, capturing Boris's attention. Startled, the priest swiftly turns around, only to find himself knocked to the ground by the swift swing of Davey's sword. As the blade comes to rest against him, Davey directs his question to Amy, asking her about the penalty for blasphemy against royalty. A gash has marred the priest's cheek, and blood is trickling from the wound. Boris, however, remains defiant, attempting to rise despite his compromised position. Davey presses the blade closer to his face, the threat evident as he denounces Boris and his so-called sacred magic. Amy remains silent, and Davey sternly reminds her not to force him to repeat himself. Trembling with fear, Amy finally speaks up, stating that the penalty for blasphemy against royalty is immediate execution. Before the words have fully left her lips, Davey swings his sword with unflinching determination. Boris's blood splatters as his body crumples to the ground, his grip on his neck growing weak. Coughing up blood, Boris attempts to convey that the queen won't stand idly by. But before he can utter any further warnings, Davey cuts him off with a curt expression of gratitude for the forewarning and promptly ends the priest's life by severing his head. In the aftermath, Linus stands before Davey, her face twisted in fury. She delivers a resounding slap across his face, berating him as crazy for killing none other than a disciple from the Holy Land. Davey maintains his composure, asserting that he acted within the confines of the law, punishing Boris for threatening his life. He emphasizes that he did nothing wrong. Linus's anger escalates, and she raises her fan once more, poised to strike him again. Davey's voice cuts through the tension as he points out that the kingdom's laws were not so draconian until he fell into a coma. He draws attention to the king's ongoing silence in the face of all that has transpired. Davey then challenges the logic behind penalizing him for punishing someone who dared to blaspheme royalty. He questions how the status of royals could be lower than that of a mere low-ranked disciple. Linus's anger boils over, her fury growing with each word Davey utters. As their exchange becomes more heated, Linus takes a jab at Davey, mocking him for following in the stupid, shallow footsteps of his mother. Her words strike a nerve, igniting a cold anger within Davey. He warns her vehemently against cursing his parents in his presence. Tensions mount, and in the blink of an eye, Linus's fan is sent flying away as Davey makes a move toward her. However, before he can escalate the situation further, three assassins from the Dark Moon abruptly materialize in front of Linus, positioning themselves as her defenders. Davey lets out a derisive scoff, remarking on her steadfast loyalty. Davey eases into an armchair, noting how an excess of anything can drive a proverbial nail into someone's metaphorical coffin, whether it's the queen or anyone else. The implication of attempting to murder a member of the royal family is no less severe. The realization strikes Linus like a lightning bolt. Davey knew all along that Carlos was the true culprit. He had been aware of the truth and chose this moment to reveal his knowledge, recognizing that he shouldn't keep such information hidden for too long. It's simply not his style. Expressing his weariness, Davey inquires if Lena's plans to leave now. He had sensed from the moment she slapped his cheek, an action entirely unsuitable towards a patient, that she's not one to be particularly considerate. He then suggests that she adopt a more ladylike demeanor during her time in his palace, especially considering the poor state of the building. He reminds her that she has taken away everyone who used to maintain the palace. Davey proposes that she, as the overseer of housekeeping, take the responsibility to rectify the situation promptly. He emphasizes that if the current state of affairs persists, it might give rise to unsavory rumors. Linus's gaze locks onto him. Her anger is palpable. Davey adds that she should make her decision wisely because he won't remain passive if she continues to act recklessly, unlike he has done in the past. Linus hurls a vase across the room, her fury directed squarely at Davey, while the Dark Moon members stand in respectful formation. She unleashes her wrath with a piercing scream, sinking to her knees on the floor. In a low mutter, she declares her willingness to assist Davey if his wish is to meet his death. She condemns his audacity to act without distinguishing between heaven and earth, foreseeing that this recklessness might cost him his life. Within the castle's bustling hallways, Amy hurries past a crowd carrying a rolled-up carpet, overhearing the hushed whispers about the rumors surrounding the first prince. People speculate that something must have gone awry in his mind after he awakened from his coma, as there's no other plausible explanation for his recent actions. Following the priest's demise and the warning to the queen, the inner palace predictably fell into a state of turmoil. Gossip began to circulate, claiming that the first prince, Davey Round, had lost his sanity. Since half of the palace's inhabitants were aligned with Queen Linus, Davey's reputation took a sharp nosedive. In the garden outside, Amy rushes over to Davey, drawing his attention to a fresh supply of food. However, Davey, with a hint of exasperation, insists he doesn't need medicinal herbs. Amy suggests that there must be someone who recognizes his good nature. Davey closes the book he's reading and, with a smile, inquires if she genuinely believes his personality is that commendable. Without hesitation, Amy nods, prompting Davey to find her unwavering trust rather peculiar, particularly considering the recent murder that occurred right before her eyes. He marvels at Amy's unwavering faith in him. Sitting within a gazebo, Davey and Amy find their conversation interrupted by an approaching figure. They both turn their attention to the man, who warmly greets Davey as the kingdom's young prince. This man is Besfus, the Grand Chamberlain affiliated with the royal family. He informs Davey that they've brought the culprits to him, as ordered by Her Majesty the Queen. Behind Besfus stands a group of individuals kneeling on the ground, among whom Davey recognizes the mustachioed man from the financial department. Besfus explains that these are the people who embezzled money from Davey's palace budget and subsequently fled. Rising from his seat, Davey inquires about the typical punishment for embezzlement. Besfus informs him that it ultimately depends on his orders, but typically results in beheadings for the culprits and their immediate families. Panic sets in among the group as they plead for Davey's mercy upon hearing this grim fate. Davey adjusts his glasses and muses aloud about the recent rumors circulating, suggesting that they claim he has an insatiable appetite for blood. The culprits react with alarm as Davey contemplates whether he should live up to these rumors. They begin to beg for their lives, crying out for mercy. Davey beckons Besfus, who promptly affirms his understanding. Turning back to the gazebo, Davey instructs them to place the culprits in jail cells without a drop of water. He believes it's only right that they pay with their lives for their greed, even though he's not entirely pleased that this aligns with the Queen's orders. Nonetheless, he decides to go along with the situation, finding it rather intriguing. Davey remains resolute in his decision, declaring that the culprits will face their execution in 9 days. Despite renewed pleas for mercy, he remains unswayed by their desperation. Later, within the castle, Besfus provides Davey with information about the positions that are still vacant for those serving him as the prince. He mentions that these roles will be filled and assigned by noon. Davey agrees and makes a specific request, stating that Amy should continue as his personal maid, with her pay raised to that of a high-rank maid and an additional bonus. Besfus assures him that his wishes will be carried out. Davey then questions Besfus about whether he's been allowed an audience with his father, the king. Besfuss apologizes but doesn't clarify if this restriction is due to the king's orders or the queen's influence. Davey cuts off any further discussion about the kingdom, as he seems to understand what Besfuss was going to say. Besfuss sighs and bows, seeking permission to leave. Davey grants it and informs Besfuss that he has already eaten the food that was sent. This revelation visibly unsettles Besfuss, but Davey continues, explaining that the food provided is sufficient and there's no need for additional medicinal herbs. Besfuss chuckles, attributing the provision of food supplies to Davey's kind nature. However, when Besfuss mentions the impending arrival of a special guest, Davey is taken aback, wondering how Besfuss is aware of this information. After Besfuss departs, suggesting Davey take some rest, Davey traces a trail of magic on his finger, pondering whether Besfuss is pretending to be ignorant despite the evidence at hand. Besfuss, the Grand Chamberlain and head of all those who serve the king, was a familiar figure from Davey's childhood. Davey never realized there was someone else within the palace besides Amy who supported him. He recalls that someone is due to visit soon. As he contemplates this, Amy timidly enters the room and informs him that the fourth prince and second princess have arrived. However, before she can finish her sentence, the door bursts open with force and arms envelop him, causing him to drop his book and glasses. In her excitement, Winley Al-Round, the second princess of the Round Kingdom, enthusiastically greets her brother. When she notices Davey lying face down on the floor, she expresses concern, and Amy rushes to his side. Then, someone from behind Winley picks her up with one hand, advising her to be more careful. It's Baris Al-Round, the fourth prince of the Round Kingdom and Winley's twin. Baris turns to Davey and reveals that they came to see him. The current king of the Round Kingdom, Crayones Al-Round, has 3 wives, including the current queen, Lanus Bariat, and 2 concubines. The second concubine, Alice, wholeheartedly supports the queen, while the first concubine, Anisha, chose to remain neutral and became an outsider among the wives. Baris and Winley are the children of Anisha, making them half-siblings with Davey, who has a different mother. Baris apologizes to Davey for their noisy arrival, but Winley, irritated by her brother's courtesy, jumps into the air and delivers a nasty kick to him. Winley hotly reminds Baris that it was he who insisted on seeing Davey. As the twins continue their banter, Davey and Amy watch them with some awkwardness. Observing the twins, Davey recalls hearing that they had been dealing with a group of robbers. However, they don't seem to exude the typical aura of royalty, unlike Linus' children. When Winley and Baris turn to Davey, expecting his approval or support in their argument, they are surprised to find him laughing. Later, as they sit down for tea, they remark on how it has been 6 years since they last met. Baris explains that they were sent to a remote area after Davey fell into a coma. Baris and Winley were just 8 years old when Davey fell into a coma, leaving him to ponder what these powerless children could have done at that tender age. Moreover, he considers the fact that their mother, concubine Anisha, sent her first daughter, Tana, to a foreign kingdom due to Queen Linus's schemes. In such circumstances, Anisha should have prioritized the protection of her remaining 2 children. Davey reassures them that he understands their situation and then inquires if they have met their father. Baris informs him that they met their father before coming to see Davey. When Davey asks about their father's well-being, Baris mentions that he appeared somewhat tired. Winley, sounding incredulous, questions whether Davey hasn't met their father yet. Davey responds optimistically, saying that he believes they will have a chance to meet him one day. Winley becomes thoughtful, and Baris remarks about the less-than-ideal condition of the palace. Davey calmly explains that there were some people who embezzled money from the budget, but assures them that the palace will soon return to its former state since the culprits have been captured. Baris, however, reacts strongly, slamming his hand on the center table, which startles Davey. Winley joins her brother in protesting and declares their intention to inform their father, the king, about this situation. Davey, maintaining his composure, advises them not to waste their efforts on this matter, which surprises Baris. Davey privately wonders if his perception of having many supporters is merely a product of his imagination. Changing the topic, Davey brings up the surprising news that he heard Winley was part of an artistic group, which piques his curiosity. Baris adds that they were equally surprised by Winley's hidden talent in magic. The twins begin to bicker again, and Davey observes their squabble with an awkward smile. However, His attention is captured when they mention the continental swordsmanship competition in which Barris is participating. Amidst the ongoing spat between the twins, Barris clears his throat and slides an envelope toward Davey. It contains an invitation to the swordsmanship competition, which is held every 5 years and is set to take place in the Polisti Kingdom this year. Davey peruses the invitation and notes the diverse range of participants, from mercenaries to royalty. Barris encourages Davey to seize this opportunity, considering his limited travel experiences outside the kingdom and adding that he has already asked the king for permission. Winley, pushing her brother aside, claims that she made the request and insists that they go to the competition together. They also mention the beauty of the Polisti Kingdom, known as the City of Water. Before the twins can launch into another argument, Davey intervenes and accepts their offer, unable to refuse their enthusiasm. The twins celebrate by raising their hands in joy, and Davey is pleased to see their happiness at his decision. As he gazes out of the window at the sky, he contemplates the idea of enjoying an event in this world and having a bit of fun. Davey eagerly looks forward to this upcoming adventure. Meanwhile, Besbus carefully pours tea into a cup and reflects on the upcoming swordsmanship competition. He mentions that Barris is turning 14 years old this year, making him nearly an adult. Besbus believes that the siblings should be having conversations with each other around this time. He reassures the king not to worry, mentioning that the young master has matured and become more upright. Besbus is impressed by the prince's calmness and splendid perception, finding them surprisingly good. The king appreciates Besbus' acknowledgement, but as he accepts the tea, he can't help but feel a tinge of sadness. Davey stands before a framed photograph of his mother, elegantly dressed for the day. Fortunately, the state of this place has been saved from resembling a haunted house. Thanks to the swift work of the Grand Chamberlain Besbus, new workers were quickly employed, and his palace has been restored to its former glory. Amy stands in awe, her eyes glistening with tears, as she looks at the sparkling new floors and everything else now clean and shiny. She's elated and grateful that everything is going well. Davey turns to Winley when she comes in, asking if he's ready. Checking the time, he asks Amy if she's packed everything. Then he hands Amy a bottle of wine, instructing her to take care of it for him. The group prepares to leave the room, ready to head to the Polisti Kingdom. The Continental Swordsmanship Competition is an event that draws worldwide attention and wields significant influence. Barris is participating, and even Davey has been allowed to go on the pretext of his illness. Davey contemplates that if Barris were to achieve something noteworthy, it could potentially undermine the position of the second prince, Carlos. He ponders whether the queen's easy acceptance of Barris's participation is a sign of her confidence that he won't achieve anything, or if she is plotting something. The announcer warmly greets the kingdom's son, and the king proceeds towards the balcony, closely followed by Besbus. Standing in the crowd, Davey can't help but feel a pang of resentment. This is the first time he's seen the person who's supposed to be his father since waking up from his coma. He knows that the king has been skillfully avoiding him for the past half a year. The king takes his seat on a chair amidst a shower of confetti. He instructs everyone to lift their heads from their bows and asks Barris if he's confident. Barris assures him that he is and vows to represent their kingdom through his achievements. Placing a hand on Barris's shoulder, the king tells him to return safely. When the king looks up, his eyes meet Davey's, who stands at the back with Amy. Their gazes lock, and Davey regards his father with a flat expression. The king, turning away, remarks to Davey that it's good to see him healthy. Winley, standing beside Davey, notices his demeanor and calls out to him with concern. She can tell something is amiss. Davey has no intention of wasting his emotions on his father at this moment. However, he's surprised by the condition of the current king. From the balcony where the king's throne is situated, an announcement rings out. The man declares that the participation of the fourth prince, Barris, in the Continental Swordsmanship Competition is of great significance. To mark this occasion, the curfew is lifted from today onward and the festival begins. Davey can't help but notice the stark difference in the king's demeanor from the heroic and confident figure he once was. The transformation is striking. It's as if the king has aged rapidly, resembling an old lion who's grown weary of everything. As the carriage continues its journey through the lush trees, Davey stares out of the window, lost in thought. When Barris initiates conversation, Davey shifts his attention to his younger siblings. Barris asks if the journey is boring, and Davey responds by assuring them that elite guards have been hired, ensuring their safety even from wild animals. Winley, noticing something amiss, questions if there's anything that's bothering him. Davey reassures them that he's perfectly fine and urges them not to worry. In fact, he's more concerned that the journey might feel tedious for them because they're traveling by carriage due to his condition. Winley dismisses that notion and suggests they focus on enjoying the journey. Barris chimes in, cautioning Winley to be responsible with her drinking. Winley, ignoring her brother's advice, mentions the fragrant wine Davey provided and inquires where he got it. Davey explains that it's something his mother left behind, and he's unsure of its origin. Barris expresses doubt about consuming something so precious, but Davey counters by asking why they should let something meant to be enjoyed go to waste. Winley notices Davey's changed attitude regarding items left by his mother, remarking that he used to be quite protective of them. Davey awkwardly insists that delicious wine is meant to be enjoyed, not stored away. With that, the three of them raise their glasses in a toast, marking the occasion with a shared drink. As the carriage continues its journey and night falls, they decide to stop and make camp for the night, planning to resume their travels in the morning. Barris notes that it will likely take another day to reach the Ballistic Kingdom. He then turns to Davey, acknowledging that it's his first time camping out, and inquires if anything is bothering him. Davey reassures Barris that he's perfectly fine and asks about Winley. Barris explains that he sent her to sleep elsewhere since she had consumed a bit too much alcohol. Davey chuckles at the situation. Barris then brings up a memory, asking Davey if he recalls ever expressing a desire to try camping like this. Davey does remember reflecting on how this journey, which could have been completed quickly on horseback, has been deliberately slowed down due to his condition. He ponders whether there are things that change and things that remain constant. As Barris leaves to check on Winley, Amy approaches Davey and suggests that he should rest as well. Davey, gazing at the sky with two moons shining, remarks that the moon looks particularly beautiful tonight. He reaches up, breaks a thin branch from a nearby tree, and infuses it with magic. With graceful motions in the air, he seems to be working on something, thinking that it might be the perfect time to make a comeback. Under the moonlit sky, a guard points up at the celestial bodies, explaining that the red moon is Cyrus and the blue one is Creus. He goes on to elaborate that Cyrus is responsible for the beginning's light, while Creus shines at the end. The person next to him acknowledges this knowledge, and the first guard, a bit snarky, comments that such information is basic common sense. Even a snotty kid would know it. Still gazing at the sky, the guard laments that he should be having conversations like these with a woman. Suddenly, another guard emerges from the bushes, inquiring about the muttering. Confused, the first guard turns, surprised by the unexpected arrival. He even wonders if the person he was talking to was a ghost. Unbeknownst to them, it was Davey who had been present but concealed in the shadows, employing phantom magic to remain undetected. With the twins having hired 5 guards, 4 of whom are elite sword experts, they have a substantial security detail, provided that nothing major occurs. Perched on a tree's fork, Davey keenly observes dark figures moving through the night sky. It becomes evident that they may be on the verge of an impending attack by assassins, numbering around 20 in total. These assassins, Davey notes, have effectively concealed their bloodthirst, indicating their skill in their deadly craft. Davey suspects that this is another scheme orchestrated by Queen Lannis to eliminate him, Barris, and Winley. He doesn't believe she would miss such an opportunity. Davey jumps down from the trees, fully aware that exposing his strength at this point will raise suspicions. However, he's not particularly concerned about that. Those who witness him in action won't live to tell the tale. With a powerful leap, Davey brandishes a branch infused with magic and strikes at the group of assassins, landing gracefully on the ground. He recalls the teachings of Pegasus Go-Jun, who instructed him in swordsmanship, emphasizing that anything held in one's hands could become a weapon. There are no fixed rules in combat. Weapons are merely extensions of the body. Davey continues to swing the branch with expert precision as he advances towards the remaining assassins. He reflects on the idea that, depending on one's perspective, even a simple piece of cloth can become an exceptional and unique weapon. With a swift, swishing motion, he launches attacks on the assassins. However, he's disappointed by their abilities, realizing they're nowhere near the level of Hermessa, who taught him the Hand of Death. As some of the assassins fall to the ground, Davey demands confirmation from them about whether Queen Linus sent them on this mission. When they remain silent and maintain their grim expressions, Davey charges at them, asserting that their response won't change anything. He continues to engage them in combat, contemplating Linus's motives for orchestrating this attack. The potential repercussions are significant, with 3 royals at stake, and they could destabilize the entire kingdom, including Linus herself. Davey wonders why she's so confident in her actions. As more blood is spilled and more assassins fall, Davey turns to the remaining ones and sarcastically tells them to relay a message to the queen. He'll destroy everything she has, regardless of her intentions. The assassins promptly attempt to flee, but Davey catches up to them. In a playful tone, he assures them that he's just kidding and won't let them escape. With a random movement of his hand and an explosion of power, he knocks them all unconscious. Standing over them with a smug expression, Davey ensures that one who is still stirring meets his demise. Suddenly, 2 more attackers approach him from behind, but Davey, ever vigilant, turns to face them and notices one attempting to flee. Davey dispatches the 2 assassins, attacking him with a powerful beam of magic emitted from the branch he wields. After their lifeless bodies fall to the ground, he casually tosses the branch toward them. With his attention fixed on the escaping assassin, Davey takes aim with his finger. He had already prepared a magical lock when he noticed the assassins approaching to attack. As long as they don't manage to cross the entire continent, they won't escape his lock. With a flick of his fingers, Davey unleashes a barrage of attacks on the fleeing assassin, including the devastating soul explosion. This technique immediately eradicates souls that lack a defined form, color, or substance. It may be brutal, but Davey has been taught not to show mercy to those who attempt to take his life. A proper end in the world of assassins is a perfect assassination. Davey walks away from the lifeless assassins and their shattered weapons, reflecting that as long as no one discovers the truth, this is indeed a perfect assassination. Sitting with her back turned, Queen Linus inquires of Sherry, who is kneeling behind her, about the outcome of the assassination attempt. Sherry reports that all the magical candles linked to her students' lives have been extinguished. Linus seeks clarification, asking if this means they've all been eliminated, which Sherry affirms. Placing her teacup on the saucer, Linus inquires about Davey and the others. Sherry informs her that they should have just arrived in the Ballistic Kingdom. Linus reacts swiftly, abruptly striking Sherry across the face and demanding an explanation. She questions how Sherry managed things when there were only 3 children and 5 knights her assassins had to eliminate. Sherry admits they are still investigating, but it appears that Prince Davey had assistance. Returning to her chair, Linus clenches her fist on the table, anxiously chewing her thumb as she contemplates who might be aiding the children. She instructs Sherry to discover the identity of this helper, warning that she will show them the consequences if they obstruct her. Sherry assures her that she will do as instructed. Linus emphasizes that her support for Sherry is contingent on her success and that if Sherry fails this time, their contract will end. She threatens to wield the power of the Barriot family and even the kingdom itself to obliterate the Black Moon Guild. Sherry acknowledges her words. In the morning, Winley excitedly points out of the carriage, calling to Barris and Davey to look at the Ballistic Kingdom as they approach. Davey gazes out of his side window, realizing that they've finally arrived. The Kingdom of Water, Pallisti, is a small city-state on the continent, about the size of Singapore on Earth. However, it is built on historic ruins and is renowned for its stunning beauty. As Davey gazes at an impressive edifice, Barris approaches him and remarks that Davey appears quite pleased. Davey agrees and looks at the magnificent amphitheater before them. This venue is where the Continental Swordsmanship competition will take place. Normally, the stadium is used as a battleground for fights, sometimes involving fighters and even monsters. Winley finds this practice somewhat barbaric. While they make their way through a stone hallway, Davey inquires if they have learned how many participants there are. It appears that 8 countries are participating in this competition. Starting with the host country, Fallon, and including the Felip Kingdom, Shorten Kingdom, and others, the focus of the competition will be on the representatives from each kingdom. Listening to Barris' explanation, Davey realizes with a hint of annoyance that it's essentially a matter of national pride between the countries. Winley finds it somewhat dull that only those younger than 20 are participating. Barris explains that it's a competition designed for the younger generation. Winley remarks that it doesn't seem like the right time to identify talented individuals. The twins start arguing again. Davey observes Barris and notices that his skills are at the mid-level expert rank, just below those of a master swordsman. This is an impressive feat considering Barris's age. Winley appears deep in thought as she mentions that the representative for the Fallen Kingdom is the famous Princess of the Sword. Davey, feeling slightly annoyed, asked her to elaborate, as he's normally confident in his memory, but it seems he missed some important news while he was in a coma. Winley explains that Elena de Fallon is not only the only princess among the 9 princes of the Fallen Kingdom, but also the favorite of the Crown Prince. Barris chimes in, saying that her fame doesn't solely stem from her royal status. It's also because she wields the deity sword. Winley adds that the deity sword is known as the sword deity's favorite blade, called Caldrius. It's one of the masterpieces crafted over 1,000 days and nights. Davey is reminded that it's been a while since he's heard that name. He recalls that his first teacher at the temple was the sword deity Hares, who often mentioned the sword's name. He wonders if this was the sword that defeated the demon lord. Compared to Dak Go-jun, his instructor at the demonic academy, it's normal for someone like Hares to leave a mark on history here. However, Davey can't shake the strange feeling as he walks alongside Winley. As they walk, a cloaked figure passes by them. When Davey moves ahead, the person turns and glances at him over her shoulder. Someone inquires why she stopped, and she touches the sword locket around her neck and dismisses it as nothing. The deity sword Caldrius, as Davey recalls, has never been damaged, and it's known to have an ego absorbed into it, allowing it to manifest magic. This ego, or sword spirit, is said to originate from the maker's soul and the swordsman's deep connection and love for the weapon. It's clear that the sword's reputation as a deity sword is well-deserved. As the 3 of them dine in a restaurant, Winley explains that the sword chose Princess Elena after hundreds of years. Barris adds that there is another reason for her fame. When Davey asks what that is, Barris playfully shifts his demeanor and mentions Elena's beauty, saying that she's considered one of the 5 blossoming beauties of the continent, causing Winley to become annoyed. Davey, on the other hand, applauds the fact that her beauty is what is truly appealing. Later, Davey finds himself dressed in an uncomfortable yet elegant and formal outfit. Annoyed, he questions Amy about the attire, wishing for something simpler. He finds the ribbon around his neck particularly tight. Amy insists that he needs to look fancy because it represents the dignity of the Round Kingdom at his first banquet. However, Davey is quick to point out that he's just a spectator, not a participant, and doesn't see the necessity of dressing up. Davey can't help but wonder if the Continental Swordsmanship Competition, a gathering of various countries, is solely meant for watching the representatives battle against each other. There might be more to it than meets the eye. As the celebrations of the festival eve unfold all around them, Winley and Barris join Davey, both dressed in fancy attire. Davey compliments Winley on her outfit, and when Barris warns him not to do so, Winley steps on Barris's foot, causing him to cry out in pain. Davey takes Winley's hand and asks her to be his escort for the evening, and they walk away, leaving Barris behind. Elsewhere, an elegant lady approaches the entrance with a man by her side. It's Elena de Fallon, and she comments that the event seems a bit noisy. The man inquires about the village she visited earlier in the day and asks if she saw the stadium. Elena casually mentions that it wasn't too bad for a place she considers somewhat barbarous. Inside the grand banquet, the atmosphere is lively, with people mingling, chatting, and dressed in their finest attire. Davey surveys the room, trying to spot the participants of the Continental Swordsmanship Competition. Many of them are quite young, given the age restrictions of the competition. While older individuals like Winley and himself are present to accompany the younger participants, there are still a significant number of young contenders. Among them, Barris seems to be the center of attention. He's being approached by numerous girls who are introducing themselves, much to his nervousness and discomfort. Davey recognizes that the banquet is a valuable opportunity to establish connections and gather information about their opponents. Winley is also garnering some attention, and the event is quite bustling. As Barris turns to look at him over his shoulder, Davey briefly contemplates how to assist his brother in this situation. However, when Winley approaches him, Davey decides to prioritize dancing with her instead. He believes that Barris should enjoy his youth and the attention he's receiving. As Winley and Davey continue dancing, Winley expresses her amazement at the fact that she's dancing with him. Davey, in turn, compliments Winley on her dancing skills. However, Winley humbly mentions that, despite her appearance, she has just recently entered the social hierarchy. Davey notices that Winley suddenly seems a bit down and asks if something is bothering her. Winley admits that if it weren't for Davey's situation, he could have participated in the competition as well, given his talent in swordsmanship. Davey, however, modestly explains that even if he has some talent, becoming an expert by the age of 14 is not something that happens without hard work. He believes that talent is somewhat illusory and that without dedication and effort, it amounts to nothing. He also mentions that these kinds of ambitions don't matter to him as much anymore. His dream is simply to live life at a leisurely pace. Winley chuckles, remarking that he sounds like a grandpa. As Winley and Davey converse on the dance floor, their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of someone. The newcomer addresses Winley and expresses his anticipation for their meeting. Davey is left puzzled by the newcomer's arrival, while Winley appears visibly annoyed. The boy pushes Davey aside and approaches Winley, taking both her hands in his and asking her for a chat. Winley, however, politely withdraws her hands and informs Prince Felician that she is currently in the middle of a conversation with her brother. Initially, Felician is annoyed, but then apologizes for his manners. He introduces himself as the seventh prince of the Boltus Kingdom, Valerian du Boltus. Davey introduces himself as well, keeping a wary eye on the newcomer. Valerian asks Davey why he's in attendance, and Davey explains that he's here to support his brother, who is participating in the competition. Felician smirks and offers Davey his wishes for a pleasant stay. He then turns his attention back to Winley. Kneeling on one knee, Valerian expresses his desire to win the competition in Winley's honor and requests that she watch it closely. Winley, clearly irritated, scolds him for being rude to all the participants and reminds him that her twin brother is also participating, making it clear that he shouldn't underestimate him. Leaving Prince Felician kneeling there, Winley takes Davey's arm and walks away with him, looking angry. Davey, in turn, thinks that while Winley can take care of herself, this newcomer might be bothersome and isn't likely to let the matter end here. Prince Felician doesn't seem to give up easily. He approaches Winley and accuses her of looking down on him while attempting to grab her. Seeing his outstretched hand, Davey decides he's been patient long enough. He extends his foot, causing Felician to trip and stumble. Davey grabs Felician's hand, warning him not to lay his hands on his sister. He releases Felician, mentioning that he's fortunate Davey didn't break any bones, as he can't afford to ruin the competition over a personal scuffle. An infuriated Felician stands up and throws his glove at Davey, striking him on the neck. He challenges Davey to a duel, declaring that he must do this for his honor as a knight. Winley demands that Felician stop, but he insists that this is necessary. Suddenly, another person approaches the group, addressing Felician and expressing concern about the ruckus he's causing. Elena, who has been observing the situation, questions Felician's right to reclaim his honor. Davey is surprised by her appearance, instantly remembering Herse. The sword deity Herse, an ancient hero, is credited with founding the Fallen Empire, one of the three major powers on the continent. Legend has it that he was the original wielder of the holy sword Caldrius and the creator of the now-lost claymore swordsmanship technique. It was said that those who mastered this technique could unleash a tsunami with a single swing of their blade. In Davey's opinion, this portrayal of the lazy old man as a legendary figure seems rather grandiose. Davey, reminiscing about Herse, gazes at Princess Elena of the Fallen Empire, often referred to as the Emperor's forbidden treasure. Rumors swirl about the Emperor's intentions, but Davey is too preoccupied to pay heed to the murmurs. What baffles him is how much Elena resembles Herse. Herse was undeniably handsome, but he was unquestionably male. The notion of Herse now being a woman in such a prestigious position is difficult for Davey to fathom. Approaching Davey, Elena inquires about his earlier remarks. Uncomfortably, Davey takes a step back, offering an apology and suggesting that he was mistaken. Elena, however, eyes him suspiciously, and Davey nervously urges her to disregard his words. Just then, Barris strides over to them, and Elena turns her attention back to Felician. Davey continues to regard Elena with interest and curiosity. Elena reprimands Felician for showing disrespect by confronting a lady already with a partner. Davey can't help but find the concept of the Emperor's forbidden treasure quite incredible, not only when compared to the arrogant Felician, but also considering the other nobles in attendance, Elena's charisma matches her fame. Elena presses Volition once more on whether he truly upholds the knight's code of honor and whether he believes himself worthy of his honor. She suggests that he apologize to the two guests. As the surrounding crowd whispers and mumbles, Volition cedes with anger. Davey, however, doesn't believe that someone as prideful as Volition would easily apologize, regardless of his initial intentions. With a confident grin, Davey steps forward and announces that he accepts the duel, which astonishes Volition. Winley and Elena both turn their attention to Davey, but his focus remains squarely on Volition. Elena intervenes, asserting that this is a senseless fight and that there's no need for it. Davey retorts that the decision is his to make, and he proceeds to remove his glove, much to Volition's eagerness. As spectators gather on balconies to witness the duel, Davey stands ready with a wooden sword, remarking that it has been a while since he held one. Behind him, a concerned Barris notes that despite Davey's claims of improvement, his opponent is a skilled swordsmanship competitor. Davey acknowledges this and, turning to the worried Winley, pats her head and reassures her not to become overly anxious. Davey turns his attention to Volition, who mockingly comments on Davey's sword skills, deeming them amateurish. He even offers Davey the chance to avoid the fight altogether if he kneels before him and admits defeat. Barris takes offense on Davey's behalf, but Davey, wearing a satisfied expression, calmly assures his brother that it's fine. With determination, Davey starts to approach Volition while Elena and the others watch the confrontation. Volition appears eager and arrogant, asserting that if he loses, he'll kneel down and acknowledge his defeat. Davey cautions him not to go back on that promise later. As they face each other, awaiting the signal to begin, Davey steals a glance back at his worried siblings. He contemplates how to handle this situation, realizing that this is the body of a weak prince who has been out of a hospital bed for less than a year. He has no intention of pushing his limits in this childish fight and has to act accordingly. Noticing Davey's hesitation, Volition taunts him, insinuating that he's afraid. He sarcastically remarks that he had been generously waiting for Davey to make the first move, expressing his disappointment in the prince for not seizing the opportunity presented to him. In the midst of Volition's arrogant ramblings, a clever idea suddenly strikes Davey. Deciding not to hold back any longer, Davey takes a swift leap and charges directly at Volition. In the blink of an eye, he's right in front of Volition, who looks alarmed, and Davey strikes him with the wooden sword. However, the sword slips from his grip, and Volition initially looks triumphant, but in the next instant, Davey lands another blow, this time to Volition's face, causing him to lose his grip on his own weapon. Volition stumbles backward in pain as his sword goes flying. Lying on his back, Volition is left in a vulnerable position, while Davey clutches his head, feigning innocence and claiming that his hands got out of control. He suggests that perhaps Volition got hit accidentally. With a smirk, Davey adds that Volition shouldn't have allowed him to strike first. The onlookers start muttering among themselves, clearly finding the situation embarrassing for Volition. It's evident that there's a stark difference in their swordsmanship skills, and yet Volition's performance is far from impressive. Furious and humiliated, Volition struggles to his feet and declares that he's going to kill Davey. Davey, still wearing a confident smile, retorts that with sword skills as crude as Volition's, he'll never be able to defeat him in swordsmanship. As the two wooden swords clash, swing, and withdraw, Volition grows increasingly frustrated. He can't fathom why he's struggling against Davey, who, in his opinion, has terrible posture and lacks control over his power. There's no way he should be losing this duel, Volition thinks, but to his bewilderment, Davey's wooden sword strikes him, drawing blood. It's a situation that Volition can't comprehend. All around them, the spectators in the balconies and the hall watch the duel unfold. Volition finds himself on the floor while Davey stands tall. Davey, pretending to be surprised, remarks that Volition got hit again, but Volition's anger knows no bounds. Suddenly, he hears the murmurs of the onlookers, who are questioning Volition's skill. They express doubt, suggesting that being hit 3 times, even if he was momentarily off guard, is far from graceful. Some even begin to question whether Volition is truly an expert. This only serves to further fuel Volition's rage, and he slams his fist on the floor, shouting at everyone to shut up. Davey gazes at Volition, wondering if the prince has been completely blinded by rage. This is precisely why Davey learned this particular swordsmanship style. Officially known as swordsmanship of a drunkard or drunk sword, this style involves wielding a sword as if the user were intoxicated. It was the brainchild of two legendary figures, Dak Go-jun, the greatest drunkard of the Hall of Heroes, and Hares, who found it amusing to create the most unorthodox and maverick swordsmanship style possible. Davey vividly remembers Hares admitting that this style is truly wicked. Between fits of laughter, Hares had cautioned Davey never to use it unless it was absolutely necessary against someone who needed to be completely humiliated in front of society. Even the creators treated it as taboo. Davey ponders the reasons behind this taboo. Perhaps it's because the style delivers powerful blows and is exceptionally sharp, or maybe it's just too overwhelmingly effective. As Volition strikes in once again, counters his attack, and then swings his sword to strike, Davey comprehends the true essence of this style. It excels at manipulating and deceiving the opponent, aiming not to protect or kill, but to utterly disgrace the adversary in front of a crowd. It's a style that perfectly lives up to its name, and its objective is to exploit the opponent's vulnerabilities by evading their attacks and delivering a decisive blow. Davey muses that it's undeniably effective, even if it tends to infuriate the opponent to no end. Felician and Davey continue their duel, their wooden swords clashing with each attack and counterattack until Felician is once again knocked to the ground. Davey can't help but think that the more people watch, the more effective this unorthodox style becomes. The audience on the balconies and in the hall only adds to the spectacle. Davey wonders whether it's his luck or if Felician is genuinely powerless against this unconventional style. He asks Felician if he's okay, inwardly relishing the fun of the situation. Regardless of how he ponders it, this style seems more suited to him than traditional swordsmanship. As Elena and others continue to watch, Felician grips his sword, infusing it with magic, and boldly declares his intention to kill Davey. Barris cries out in outrage, recognizing the use of energy as a sword spirit and demanding to know if Felician has gone insane for daring to use it. Ignoring everyone's concern, Felician grins maliciously and charges toward Davey, who stands calmly, contemplating how to counter the impending attack. Davey can sense a cold, scrutinizing gaze on him from the start, and it's coming from Elena. Felician approaches Davey, thinking he has caught him, and raises his sword to strike. However, it merely slices through thin air, leaving Felician shocked. Before he can comprehend what's happening, Davey swiftly strikes his foot with his own, causing Felician to fall backward onto the ground. Davey then brings his sword down, missing Felician's head by mere inches. Felician's eyes widen in shock, while Davey appears nervous as he asks why Felician is on the ground. He pretends to look around in surprise and then acts shocked, declaring his own victory. People in the crowd gossip and mutter, expressing their disappointment in Prince Felician's lackluster performance during the duel. They also offer their commendations to Prince of Round, some even confirming that he had indeed recently emerged from a coma. Davey explains the challenges he faced in regaining his swordsmanship skills after his extended illness. Despite the difficulties, luck had favored him this time. Felician sulks in a corner while Elena stands nearby with her arms crossed, commenting that it was quite an entertaining spectacle. However, her expression remains distant and she seems lost in thought. Elena dismisses the situation as silly and abruptly decides to depart, ignoring those who try to stop her. Davey, joined by Barris and Winley, observes her departure and perceives her actions as rather cold. Inside their carriage, Winley and Barris express their concerns to Davey about his reckless behavior during the duel. They emphasize that, while the hosts may not have shown it, the situation caused quite a commotion. Davey, however, dismisses their worries, stating that the issue has been resolved. Barris reminds him that luck played a significant role, as Felician's skills are not to be underestimated, having witnessed his impressive demonstrations at previous gatherings. Winley concurs, adding that Felician's character is far from admirable. Davey is just relieved that his plan unfolded as intended. However, Barris warns him not to attempt such risky fights again, as luck may not always be on his side. Davey playfully responds by firmly grasping Barris's hand, causing him to cry out in pain. When Davey releases his grip, Barris is astonished by his incredible strength and inquires about it. Davey insists they shouldn't treat him as if he were still a patient, adding that he will heed their advice regardless, especially since it comes from his dear brother. Davey reflects on how it was inevitable that Barris and Winley would eventually learn about his abilities. Winley expresses relief that her brother is indeed exceptional, considering his ability to catch an opponent off guard who couldn't withstand the weight of a sword strike. Felician, she notes, never anticipated such a resounding defeat. Davey is content with the outcome. At night, within the castle walls, Felician is in a fit of rage, tossing chairs around the room as others desperately attempt to calm him down. He's livid that Davey had the audacity to humiliate him, the heir to the baldest era, a radiant figure with unparalleled talent. In Felician's eyes, there are few things in this world that he cannot possess, and that includes the Princess of Round. His affection for her may be lukewarm, but he chose her as his future bride with the knowledge that he'd also gain Barris, a mid-level sword expert, as a subordinate. The prospects of marriage negotiations with Round's queen had been looking promising for him. However, now he's baffled as to why he must endure such humiliation. Despite the efforts of those around him to soothe his anger, Felician angrily orders them to leave him alone, continuing to hurl chairs across the room. He clenches his fists, grits his teeth, and makes a solemn vow to himself that he will exact revenge on Davey, his fury reaching a boiling point. In the midst of his rage, he hears a voice inquiring if he desires to kill. Bewildered, he looks around but finds no one. The voice persists, asking him once more if he wishes to kill. Felician demands to know who is speaking when faint wisps of smoke gradually coalesce into a phantom arm that gently touches his cheek. The enigmatic voice offers to assist him in killing Davey, promising to help him rend his flesh and shatter his bones. As the smoky apparition dissipates, a woman emerges from the shadows, introducing herself as Sherio. Felician can only stare in astonishment as Sherio approaches him, taking his face in her hands and embracing him. Her elongated canines gleam ominously as she suggests that he leave his thirst for revenge to her and act as he sees fit. The next morning, Davey finds himself in her room, deep in contemplation, as Amy enters and informs him that the disqualifier round against Burris is about to commence. Davey conjures intricate strands of magic within his palm, taking a moment to collect himself. He realizes there's still some time left before his match, and with a determined look, he rises from his seat, signaling to Amy that they should proceed. He understands that other matters can be put on hold for now. At the stadium, Barris stands resolutely on the ground, ready for his match, while Winley watches from the stands, her eyes filled with anticipation. Somewhere in the shadows of the arena, Felician sits on a bench, a malicious grin stretching across his face, his thoughts fixated on the coming events. The spectators have gathered in the stadium, creating an electrifying atmosphere. As the participants make their way to the ring, they are greeted with cascades of confetti, and Davey can't help but notice the fervor of the crowd. Barris's match was scheduled for the afternoon, and he intentionally skipped the morning sessions, citing illness. Now he joins Winley in the VIP seats. When Winley inquires about his health, suspecting that he overexerted himself the previous day, Davey refrains from mentioning his stomach ache, determined to keep it to himself. Despite having acquired remarkable magical abilities at a young age, he is not immune to ailments like this, as he hasn't achieved complete mastery over his powers yet. If the discomfort persists, he may have to apply his holy power to reduce it. With a sigh, Davey settles into his chair, and Winley directs his attention to Barris, who has entered the ring and is receiving an enthusiastic response from the crowd. Winley is visibly pleased with the warm reception Barris is getting, while Davey, examining the schedule in his hand, comments on the unfortunate matchup. It seems that they've pitted Barris against Felician too early in the competition. As Felician and Barris stand facing each other in the ring, the referee lays down some ground rules. He emphasizes that although the blades are dulled, life-threatening attacks are strictly forbidden. Additionally, the use of mana to enhance their attacks might lead to penalties, so they should exercise caution. From their vantage point, Davey and Winley discuss the crowd's excitement. Winley expresses concern that Barris might become overly enthusiastic and end up hurting himself like an angry calf. Davey reassures her that Barris is an experienced swordsman, and he even has a form of insurance. With the torchbearer mages raising their torches and Felician and Barris preparing to engage, the referee swipes his hands down, signifying the beginning of the match, and the two opponents move towards each other. Davey notes that Felician's swordsmanship from yesterday's match had some unexpected movements, while Barris relies on his immense strength to deal substantial damage. Just by comparing their styles, Barris seems to have the upper hand. Moreover, Valerian might struggle to withstand Barris's powerful strikes. He might opt to avoid direct combat. As the two swordsmen clash, their blades flashing, Barris is taken aback when Valetian successfully blocks his attack. The crowd watches intently, commenting on the fierce battle unfolding before them. To Davey, Valetian's effective block was quite unexpected, making him wonder if Valetian had grown significantly stronger. He contemplates the possibility that Valetian has indeed improved since yesterday, despite the fact that even a genius requires time and effort to reach a certain level of physical ability. As the battle between Barris and Valetian rages on, Davey begins to feel a peculiar sensation. The clash of swords in the ring catches his attention, and he notices that Barris is moving more swiftly than he's ever seen before. Winley, too, is surprised by Barris's newfound agility and questions whether he has improved. Davey agrees that Barris has made remarkable progress. He reminisces about when they were just children and how Barris had always dreamed of becoming a knight. It's been 6 years since then, and Davey can see the immense effort Barris has put into honing his skills. As Valetian charges towards Barris for another attack, their swords clashing once more, Davey begins to feel an unusual and ominous sensation. He suddenly stands up, leaving Winley looking at him with confusion. In the ring below, Barris is feeling a bit nervous. He hadn't expected Valetian to put up such a strong resistance against his longsword. Valetian is proving to be a persistent and formidable opponent. His movements are unpredictable, and Barris knows he needs to stay alert. With the intention of ending the match, Barris firmly grips his sword, raises it high, and charges towards Valetian, ready to strike. As he draws closer to Valetian, he lifts his sword into the air and prepares to deliver a powerful blow. However, to his surprise, Valetian merely grins and stands his ground. Barris is forced to alter the direction of his sword mid-strike, lest he unintentionally land a killing blow. He attempts to execute his next combo move swiftly, but then he notices Valetian's sword, infused with a mana flow, coming towards him. The tip of Valetian's sword strikes Barris in the chest, and his eyes widen in shock. As his vision blurs, he can't help but think that he might be facing his death. The previous night, Barris had been practicing alone, wielding his sword with determination. Davey suddenly appeared behind him, offering praise for his diligent practice. As he descended from the low stone ledge, Davey remarked that Winley had already gone to bed. Barris confessed that he couldn't sleep, his thoughts consumed by the upcoming match against Valetian. With a serious expression, Barris declared his unwavering determination to defeat Valetian with his own hands. Davey, without a trace of doubt, assured Barris that he believed in him and that he would perform admirably. Barris continued his practice, and Davey, while pretending to read a book, kept a close eye on his brother. Davey noted Barris's smooth and clean posture, as well as his honest and smooth mana flow. Davey decided to offer his brother a little assistance. He raised his hand, preparing to use a technique that, if made public, would cause chaos among the spectators. However, Barris was his brother, and Davey felt no hesitation in helping him. Davey approached Barris from behind and placed his hands on his shoulders, offering to give him a massage. Barris sat down, and Davey instructed him to close his eyes and relax. With a focus on the flow of mana, Davey began applying pressure to Barris's back and shoulders. He knew it might cause Barris some discomfort, but his brother attributed it to his muscles being tense. Their mana was interacting, mixing, and forcing activity, a technique that defied the conventional rules of this world. Davey had heard of a place that provided excellent massages, and he couldn't help but wonder about the possibilities. Davey suddenly uttered a strange word and slammed his hand against Barris's back. Barris cried out, demanding to know what language Davey was speaking, as Davey's hand came down on him again, eliciting another cry of pain. Finally, Davey stepped away, signing, as Barris collapsed to the floor. Mana flowed all over Barris's back, and Davey was satisfied to see it moving. While it wouldn't immediately help Barris with the match the next day, it would allow him to grow stronger over time. When Barris didn't immediately get up from the floor, Davey insisted that he do so, warning him about catching a cold if he slept there. After a bit of complaining, Barris finally got up, and with the threat of another massage looming, quickly ran off to his room to sleep. As Barris walked away, Davey completed his insurance circle on Barris's back. Back in the present, as Valetian's sword strikes Barris's chest, the protective shield generated by Davey's insurance circle springs to life. The sword rebounds and flies away, leaving Barris kneeling on the ground, encircled by the protective shield, while Valetian stands, unarmed and bewildered. The crowd in the stadium rises with assumptions and confusion. They notice something unusual around Prince Barris and recognize it as a mana shield, a technique typically used only by advanced experts. The stadium fills with shock and amazement, and Winley looks delighted. However, as she turns her gaze towards Davey's empty chair, she realizes that he is no longer seated there. As Barris spits blood, the referees rush to him, urgently calling for a timeout. They firmly order Valetian to stay away from Barris, their voices filled with authority and anger. Valetian has blatantly violated the match rules and attempted to murder his opponent. Such an act has the potential to escalate into a declaration of war. Not only would Valetian face penalties, but the hosting nation would also send an official complaint to his Baldus kingdom. An officer from his kingdom approaches Valetian, worry etched across his face, and asks his prince to say something to defuse the situation. However, in a shocking turn of events, Valetian swiftly turns and seizes the officer's throat, hoisting him up into the air. With a powerful blast of energy, Valetian decapitates the man, and his lifeless body falls to the ground. Valetian stares at the blood on his hands, his expression twisted into a wicked grin. His unnatural shadow looms menacingly behind him, casting an eerie aura over the scene. The crowd begins to disperse in sheer horror, with the guards urgently instructing everyone to flee as Prince Valetian has transformed into a monstrous figure. Some among them contemplate attempting to control him, but others wisely reason that they are vastly outnumbered and need reinforcements to deal with this unprecedented threat. Amidst the chaos, Davey approaches Barris and kneels down in front of him, gently cradling his head in his lap. He inquires if Barris slept well the previous night. Confused about the competition, Barris seeks reassurance from Davey, who warmly assures him that he has performed admirably. With a sense of pride, Barris mentions his use of a mana shield, and Davey smiles in response. A mana shield is an expert-level barrier created by one's mana to protect them from danger. Davey sets it up just in case, but it's more due to Barris's own growth that he is safe. Placing 2 fingers on Barris's forehead, Davey channels mana into him and instructs him to stop talking and get some rest. The referees arrive to take Barris away on a stretcher, and amidst the chaos and panic in the stadium, Davey begins to walk towards the epicenter of the disturbance, his determination shining through. The referees and mages, realizing their attacks are futile and have no effect on the transformed Valetian, acknowledge that he is too powerful for them. One of them urges the other to prioritize evacuating the audience, as the protective barrier around them wouldn't hold for much longer. Davey, undeterred by the danger, steps through the barrier towards the group attempting to subdue Valetian. They try to stop him, warning of the danger, but Davey continues to advance with an air of confidence. Winley, watching from the stands, called out to Davey in a panic, questioning how he ended up down there in this chaotic situation. Amidst the carnage, Valerian takes another life. Davey approaches him casually, remarking on how much he has changed overnight and pondering how to deal with him. Valerian, fueled by rage, unleashes bolts of power and leaps toward Davey. The mages in front of Davey shout to block Valerian and prevent him from reaching the prince. Blood spills as they try to fend him off. Just as Valerian is about to reach Davey, Winley comes running from behind, calling out for him. Concerned and distracted, Davey turns to her, but before he can react, Alina grabs his collar and hurls him out of harm's way. As Valetian's demon claws reach out, Alina lands in front of him, brandishing her sword. She focuses on her attack and executes a move called Descending Sword Mountain Split. Her flashing strike sends Valetian hurtling backward. As he staggers away, grinding his teeth, Alina stands tall, and Davey watches from behind her, wearing a slightly uncomfortable expression. In the aftermath of the attack, Alina stands, awaiting the impact on Valetian, only to be shocked as he rises again, his anger even more pronounced. With a furious scream and snarl, he radiates energy outward. Alana wastes no time and launches another relentless assault, landing blow after blow. She swiftly throws him off and executes an aerial roll, delivering a powerful kick that sends him hurtling against a cracked wall. The mages watch in disbelief as the dissipating smoke reveals Valetian slumped against the damaged wall. Someone declares Princess Elena the winner and urges another to detain Valetian immediately before he can rise again. Beside Davey, Winley pleads with him to leave the situation to Elena and take cover. Observing the match's outcome, Davey feels a strange sense of awe and lets out a light laugh. He can't help but think that Elena is remarkably spirited and more composed than the disorderly crowd around them. Then, to everyone's surprise and confusion, Elena raises her sword once more, her expression livid, and mentions something about a vampire before rushing towards the now-bound Valetian, restrained by mages. As Valetian struggles against his chains, Davey watches in shock as Valetian drives his own sharp, nail-like hands into his chest, a malevolent grin spreading across his face. Suddenly, a deafening explosion erupts, known as blood polis, shrouding everything in a blinding red mist. Amidst the mist, as some people fall and others seek shelter, Davey holds Winley close in a protective embrace. She trembles, and Davey reassures her that everything will be all right. With a soft smile, he whispers for her to rest well and gently pats her head. In a soothing tone, he tells her that once she wakes up from this dream, everything will return to normal. However, Davey's expression soon turns grim. He realizes that if he doesn't act swiftly, the necromantic mana will become intertwined with the situation. He twitches as the mana seems to scream at him, expressing its frustration. Once a person reaches a certain level of connection with their mana, that power can take on a distinct personality. Davey has 3 different types of power, and each has its own unique and sometimes troublesome character. The necromantic mana, in particular, is akin to a psychopath, making it the most effective but also the most unsettling to use. Regular mana has a tsundere-like personality, initially difficult to deal with but ultimately cooperative once relied upon. On the other hand, holy power is incredibly stubborn and lazy, often requiring a significant disturbance to motivate it to action. Davey understands that he needs to act decisively to prevent the situation from worsening. Davey gently places a hand on Winley's head and invokes 4th-tier holy magic, casting a radiant blessing that envelopes her in a soothing, peaceful atmosphere. With this enchantment in place, Winley will remain undisturbed in her peaceful slumber for a while. As Davey surveys the scene around him, he can't help but feel a sense of horror. Blood polis refers to a city of blood, a power that allows its user to drain the life essence of others to strengthen themselves and the surrounding area. Davey recognizes that, given his current limit with 4th-tier holy magic, he can't save everyone in the stadium. Nevertheless, he is relieved that Barris managed to escape the area earlier. Steeling himself for what lies ahead, Davey begins to walk away from Winley's side, his eyes fixed on the monstrous figure that Valetian has become. Cracking his knuckles with a sense of determination, he decides that, since there is no one around to witness, he will confront Valetian at his own pace and with his true power. Unbeknownst to Davey, Elena, with a broken sword in hand, is struggling to stand up behind him, determined to do her part in the fight. Davey can't help but admire Elena's resilience as he observes her struggling to rise amidst the chaotic situation. Retaining one's consciousness inside the blood polis is a feat in itself and a testament to her exceptional willpower. Her reputation as the owner of the deity's sword is well earned. Despite the dire circumstances, Davey can't deny that Elena remains strikingly beautiful, even when facing the brink of death. He approaches her cautiously, placing a hand on her shoulder in an attempt to offer comfort and assistance. Startled, Elena shrugs off his touch and moves away from him, her guard still up. Davey speaks reassuringly, acknowledging the ongoing danger but also the fact that Elena has managed to retain control over herself in this nightmarish situation. Amidst the lingering mist, Valetian's demonic presence still looms, and Davey decides it is best for Elena to step away from the danger. However, before he can make his move and go deal with Valetian, Elena firmly grasps his wrist, urging him to wait. She questions how he can appear completely unscathed in this dangerous situation, her tone a mix of confusion and frustration. Davey turns to her, thinking it would be best to downplay his unusual powers. He wears a casual smile and shrugs, trying to pass it off as nothing out of the ordinary. However, instead of easing Elena's concerns, his response seems to infuriate her further. With a stern expression, Elena insists that this isn't a situation that can be resolved by mere luck or charm, as was the case at the banquet. She goes on to explain the nature of the nobles of the night, rumored to be descendants of ancient blood demons mentioned in the tomes. Elena believes that Davey, who can't sense mana, will be torn apart by them. She adopts a defensive stance with her sword, instructing him to flee from the scene immediately. She vows to do her best to confront the vampiric Felician. Davey watches her silently, recognizing her unwavering determination and reliability. It is a different side of her compared to the previous day, and it feels more genuine, as if she has encountered a long-standing arch-nemesis from a past life. In a haunting flashback, a younger Alina, clad in her nightdress, stumbled upon a vampire drinking her mother's blood in the dimly lit castle hallway. The traumatic sight had left an indelible mark on her psyche, searing every detail into her memory. Since that chilling encounter, she has harbored an unyielding determination to eradicate vampires, right down to their very roots, until their last breath. Standing resolute before the now completely transformed Felician, Elena raises her sword, her gaze unwavering. However, before she can execute her attack, an unexpected blow strikes her from behind, sending her crashing to the ground. Caught off guard and bewildered, she finds herself staring up at Davey, who firmly admonishes her for interfering with his work. Elena, still recovering from the surprise attack, questions his meaning, but Davey simply instructs her to sit and observe as he positions himself to confront the vampire. Davey concentrates mana into his fist, preparing to face the charging Felician. His mind races with memories of countless battles in the temple since his arrival, numbering in the hundreds or perhaps even thousands. Rising gracefully into the air, Felician extends his hand downward, poised to strike. Davey harbors an unshakable belief that there is no one in this world who understands vampires better than him. A vampire, infected and further empowered by the blood polis, should pose no insurmountable challenge. As Felician closes in on him, Davey unleashes a potent magic projectile that strikes the vampire in the back, effectively countering his attack. Felician cries out in anguish, swiftly turning to face Davey. Davey is already accumulating crackling energy in his hand, preparing for his next move. With a resolute focus, Davey unleashes a powerful blow, directing it straight at Felician's chest, where his heart beats. To enhance the impact, Davey employs a combination of techniques, including perforation and blood vessel combustion. The result is devastating. A surge of energy pierces through Felician, causing him to be flung violently backward. Felician collides with a nearby statue of a soldier, shattering it into fragments as he continues to soar through the air. Behind Davey, Elena watches the astonishing spectacle unfold in sheer disbelief as tendrils of smoke twist and dance around Davey. Chapter 23. Elena continues to watch in complete shock as Davey stands tall amidst the aftermath of his powerful attack. She can't help but wonder if what she has just witnessed is truly possible. An infected vampire, a formidable adversary that neither the knights, mages, nor her own blade could halt, has been brought to a halt by an ordinary human who didn't seem to possess a single drop of mana. To add to the mystique, this human is none other than an unfortunate prince who has recently awoken from a coma. Davey extends a hand toward Elena, offering assistance. She hesitates for a moment, her thoughts racing, before finally deciding to accept his hand. However, instead of taking his hand, she makes a somewhat embarrassed request. She informs Davey that her blade was broken during the previous battle, and she requires his sword. Davey, in response, reaches to unclasp the sword locket Elena is wearing. He holds it in his hand and explains that he is supposed to receive an item after the boss battle. Davey declares that he intends to borrow the strength of the deity's sword. The heroic blacksmith, known for dedicating his life to crafting a sword capable of saving the world, among countless other weapons, is none other than the legendary blacksmith Surtur, famously recognized for his remarkable ability to transform common ores into precious swords and turn what others considered junk into unprecedented treasures. He was the fortunate recipient of the Spirit's blessing, which bestowed upon him the rare talent to forge swords infused with mana. His fame transcended generations, making him a household name throughout the continent. Among the numerous masterpieces Surtur crafted during his lifetime, 12 swords, in particular, became legendary. These weapons were revered as national treasures and were scattered across the continent. One of these remarkable swords bore the name Calderas, meaning the White Guardian in the ancient spirit language. While all of Surtur's swords were exceptional magic weapons, Calderas held a unique place among them. The distinctiveness of Calderas stemmed from the fact that Surtur had expended his own life force during its forging and had bestowed it upon his friend, the sword deity Hares. Caldera's possessed something few other blades did, an ego. It had developed its own consciousness, granting it the ability to wield its strength independently. To those unfamiliar with the truth, this might sound awe-inspiring, but Davey, having a deeper understanding of the sword, had a clearer picture of its personality. The very next instant, Davey feels a tug in his hand, as if the sword spirit in the locket is urging him to let it go. Davey finds this quite rude and engages in a rather one-sided conversation with the locket, admonishing it for vibrating in his hand and demanding its cooperation. However, when Alina reaches for the locket, she collides with Davey, who catches her in his arms. He issues a warning to the spirit within the locket, stating that it must cooperate or else Alina, its owner, would meet a dire fate. Davey can't help but silently admire Elena's tenacity. Even as the force sustaining her consciousness dwindles, she displays remarkable resilience. While the princess undoubtedly possesses exceptional talent, it was clear that her current matchup was favorable. Understanding one's limits is just as crucial as talent in such situations. Elena sinks to the floor, and Davey summons an energy ball, clenching his hand to emit beams of power. A brilliant, regal sword materializes in his grasp, and Davey marvels at it as he holds it in his hands. The spirit within the sword wonders how Davey can wield its strength, to which Davey responds that it simply needs to lend him its power. He swings the sword, rising into the air and utilizing the deity sword resonance effect. With a powerful strike, he conjures a colossal claymore lightning attack that shoots into the sky above the stadium. Amidst the fading power, Davey calls out to the demon, urging it to reveal itself. The time has come to emerge from hiding. Something materializes within the red mist, and a bat-like figure flies out. While Davey had anticipated encountering a vampire, he didn't expect to encounter a high-ranking servant. Gradually, the wisps of smoke coalesce into the form of a woman, solidifying before them. It is Sherio, the vampire who possessed Felician. Floating in the air, Sherio expresses her surprise that someone was assisting the humans from the shadows, but she hadn't anticipated it would be Davey. Davey, unfazed by her presence, nonchalantly urges her to descend, suggesting that looking at her from that height is straining her neck. He follows with a series of crude comments, further fueling Sherio's anger. Davey merely smirks, resting the sword on his shoulder. In the blink of an eye, he charges towards her, demanding that she come down immediately. Sherio argues that if Davey causes such a massive tragedy, there might be no consequences for Linus to face. While the relationship with the Boltus nation might sour, given their precarious situation, it is unlikely they would risk starting a war with the Round Kingdom. Davey responds with a taunt, and enraged by his condescending remarks, Sherio raises her hand and channels magic into it, launching an attack that shatters statues in its path. Davey, however, swiftly evades the harm, commenting on her heightened emotions. In the next instant, shark shards of energy hurtle toward him, and once again, he agilely dodges the attack, narrowly avoiding the shards. Davey leaps from the pillar and lands on the floor below. He grips the sword's hilt tightly and maneuvers to evade another explosive assault. Perched atop a statue, Sherio remarks that this situation might be beyond her expectations, but ultimately, Davey is just a human. Davey retorts by pointing out that she, too, is a servant of a human. Furious, Sherio arms herself with a weapon and swings it in Davey's direction. From a temple memory, Davey recalls Hare's words about the incredible strength of a vampire lord. One of their servants was deemed the strongest being, and the entire concept of vampires is inherently powerful. Among their abilities, the most unique is the capacity to inherit the legacy and become a lord. These creatures are far from easy to kill, except when facing their mortal enemies, the High Elves. To defeat a vampire lord, one has to drive them into a state of uncontrollable anger and then defeat them. Regardless of the creature's nature, losing their cool makes their movements predictable. This tactic is particularly effective against vampires, as they have a strong sense of pride. The higher their rank, the easier they are to provoke. The key is simply to win. Davey remembers these words of the sword deity from before the deity was incapacitated. Considering Elena's sword, it seems the Fallen Kingdom places great faith in Hare's. Davey can't help but wonder what would happen if they knew him in person. Back in the present, Davey successfully evades Sherio's successive attacks. As he lands on the ground and swings his new sword, he realizes that she has erected a blood barrier. The sword spirit informs Davey that Sherio is a vampire count, and considering her lineage, she might have the potential to become a lord. Davey confidently expresses his intention to deal with her, earning skepticism from the spirit about the possibility of such a task. Undeterred, Davey smiles and gracefully evades another of Sherio's attacks. Sherio taunts Davey, claiming that no matter how leisurely he acts, there is only one outcome awaiting him. Even Elena, who had received the sword deity's sword and his techniques, has been defeated. She suggests that if he wants to meet his end peacefully, he should stand still and accept his retribution. However, Davey seizes the moment, launching an attack amidst the rising smoke while Sherio is momentarily distracted. Swiftly, he closes the distance between them, and as Sherio turns to face him, he ascends into the air, positioning himself directly above her. With the sword in hand, Davey remarks that the true sword deity's techniques are far more formidable than what Elena has displayed. Drawing upon his training with hares, he executes the Great Claymore technique known as the Grand Mountain Splitter. Sherio lets out a shocked scream as the powerful strike hits her squarely. It shatters her barrier, and she is sent hurtling down to the ground, causing the floor to break and collapse beneath her. Amidst the sparkling shower of dust, smoke, and debris caused by the battle, Davey finds himself amazed. He now understands why people prefer overpowered gear in such situations. As the sword spirit begins to gloat about its newfound materialization after several thousand years, Davey can't help but note its excitement. When it inquires about his identity and his ability to wield its power, Davey reminds it to stick to the terms of their contract. There is no need to delve into their shared history. Davey is well aware that the spirit won't believe him if he reveals that he is the original owner's reincarnation. Instead, it would likely react with outrage, considering it an insult to the deceased. When the spirit points out that the vampire has disappeared, Davey decides it is best to leave her for now, as the situation isn't good for pursuing her. The red stone, the blood polis, still hangs in the sky. The spirit explains that while the explosion earlier destroyed its nucleus, it will continue to spread until every human in its vicinity is dead. Davey realizes that the most troubling aspect is that those exposed to it for an extended period will turn into infected individuals. Davey knows that resolving this crisis will require rank 6 long-range purification magic, and even then, many of the humans who have already lost their life force might not survive. Even without looking, the spirit senses that the humans outside are likely hesitating given the chaotic situation. Even if they don't understand what has transpired, the area has clearly been turned upside down. Observing this, the spirit remarks that Davey is quite fortunate. Despite his youthful appearance, he possesses the strength of a master and has been far enough away from the blood polis's influence to remain unaffected. Davey replies that while he might be a master, he still needs time to manifest an aura blade. Privately, he acknowledges that his strength comes from a different path than that of those who have gradually gained experience. It is his knowledge and training that have propelled him to his current level. He thinks of it as a form of poetic doping that made him this strong. Suddenly, the spirit senses an overwhelming amount of mana and asks Davey who he truly is. It also detects necromantic mana and holy power, a combination it has never encountered before. Davey simply quips that he is the human who defies common sense, causing the spirit to declare him insane. Davey decides to end the conversation, lowering the sword and piercing it into the earth. He suggests leaving the resolution to the sword, as he doesn't possess the necessary strength to handle the current situation. It is time to clean up the mess. Davey doesn't plan on sacrificing himself to save strangers, but if doing so can aid his own recovery and unfreeze his stiffened powers, he is willing to use them as a stepping stone. He brings his hands together in an uncharacteristic prayer, invoking Freya, the caretaker of all, and hoping she can provide him with guidance through the darkness. If not, he knows she wouldn't be able to solve the situation on her own. The sword spirit questions the unusual nature of his prayer. Davey's holy powers are a bit stubborn due to the influence of Lady Daphne. His connection with holy power isn't established through devout worship of a deity, but rather through understanding and trust. If he is to classify it, it is more like attracting the curiosity of a deity than earning their love. Continuing to call on Freya for permission, Davey contemplates that if there is no way to save those who have lost their life force, then he would replace it with an even greater strength. This is a spell created by history's greatest holy power user, Daphne, the highest-ranked holy magic that requires the permission of a higher being to employ. Davey summons the ninth-tier ultimate holy magic known as Saint Sanctuary. As the tremendous power begins to flow into the sword, the spirit within it complains about the overwhelming energy. Forces descend from the sky, and the entire area is bathed in blinding light. Davey perseveres in his prayer position, struggling against the descending force, while people outside gaze in wonder. The entire kingdom seems to be enveloped in the radiant halo of the light. Phantom wings descend from the sky and settle on Davey, latching onto his back. Once the intense light settles, the now darkened red stone falls to the ground. Davey lets out a sigh, feeling as if his back has been seared by red-hot iron. When the sword spirit remains unresponsive, Davey wonders if it has been knocked out. Shortly after, Davey tumbles to the ground face first. Then he finds himself facing a status window. After observing it, he looks up at the sky, where a figure floats. He addresses her as Freya and asks if it isn't a bit too much. With a smile, Freya replies that it is nothing. Realizing it has been ages since he enjoyed a peaceful rest, Davey comes to understand that he hasn't experienced true relaxation for at least the past 6 months. It feels as if his mind has undergone a complete reset. As Davey gradually stirs in what Winley's voice tells him are the Peristiductum's lodgings, he finds himself looking at the concerned face of Winley. With some effort, he props himself up and inquires about the duration of his sleep. Winley, fraught with worry, informs him that he has been unconscious for 2 days, during which she has been extremely concerned for his well-being. During their conversation, Winley recounts a dream she had in which Davey rescued her from a dangerous red mist. Davey, looking at her with a comforting gaze, gently pats her head in acknowledgement. Their discussion takes a turn when Winley mentions a discovery she made while examining him. She draws his attention to a strange mark on his back and asks if it could possibly be a stigma. As Davey observes the bandages that cover his back, he can't help but consider whether the sensation of his back being torn apart was related to the formation of this stigma. He can't recall experiencing anything like this during his time at the temple, which leads him to question if this stigma is unusually large. Winley goes on to explain that the high-ranking priest who tended to him discovered the stigma. This revelation has thrown the entire dukedom into turmoil. Given that all the red mist was purged and the stigma appeared in a place imbued with holy energy where Davey had been, it is no surprise that panic ensued. Davey grasps the gravity of the situation. Unlike the ever-loyal priests, a stigma essentially signifies that Davey has been chosen by the deities. However, he finds comfort in the fact that, aside from the stigma itself, not much else seems to be widely known about what transpired. Contemplating whether he should continue to conceal his powers, Davey decides to play it safe for now. He tells Winley that he was unconscious during the events in question and thus has no knowledge of what occurred. Winley expresses her disbelief at the seemingly impossible turn of events and inquires if he sustained any other injuries. Davey assures her that he is unharmed. Inwardly, Davey muses on the outcomes of his recent actions. Using ninth-tier holy magic, the deity's sanctuary, to dispel the blood polis allowed him to not only eliminate the threat, but also significantly boost his holy power in the process. Although it has merely been a simple experiment, the results are astonishing. His mana reserves expanded considerably. The transformation of his mana from normal to being affected by holy power, and even some into necromantic mana, marks a significant development. While it might not be a complete game-changer, it does enable him to wield an aura blade unique to himself now. The growth in his holy power has been the most significant of the three, and Davey attributes it to the power of the stigma, which seems to require an opportunity to develop. As Davey and Winley continue their conversation, she explains how chaotic things have been since his loss of consciousness. In particular, she mentions Amy's distress and the unexpected arrival of Princess Elena, who insisted on taking Davey to a proper doctor. Davey expresses his gratitude for Winley's care and suggests she go get some rest. She agrees and prepares to leave, offering reassurance that Barris has been safely discharged and that the competition has been on hold since the incident. With a wave, she bids him goodbye and exits the room. Alone, Davey surveys Winley's status window and ponders the sudden appearance of these windows and their resemblance to a game interface. He wonders whether his prayers to Dionysus or his use of magic meant for his astral body triggered their manifestation. Suddenly, a voice disrupts his thoughts, remarking on his apparent interest in observing others' psychology and condition. Startled, Davey tosses aside the sheets and scans the room for the source of the voice, demanding to know who it is and warning them to reveal themselves. The voice directs him to look below, and as he does, Davey sees a horned woman surrounded by fluttering butterflies. She reveals that she is somewhat surprised by her seal being unintentionally released, but is willing to accept it if it aligns with the will of the higher being. In a flashback within the temple, Davey discovers Hare's painting in the garden and inquires about the subject of his artwork. Hare's, with a hint of amusement, encourages Davey to identify the female figure he has painted. Davey examines the portrait closely and questions whether it depicts a demon. Hare's affirms his guess, prompting Davey to inquire further about why he chose to paint a portrait of a demon. Hare's shares the story behind the painting, explaining that the demon in question is named Berserk. In the past, when she still resembled a human, Hare's had adopted her and personally imparted the art of swordsmanship to her. Just as the legends foretold, Berserk played a crucial role in ending the Great War by confronting and sealing the demon lord of the abyss, Berserk von Fallen, within Hare's own sword. Now, in the present, Davey recognizes Berserk in the bedroom as the same figure from Hare's painting. Berserk, standing on his knee, casually remarks that he appears to know her quite well. Davey is taken aback by her small, pixie-like size, finding it hard to believe his eyes. Davey has bound her, and she casts a stern gaze upon him, remarking that there was no need for hostility, considering it is their first encounter. Davey insists that he simply wants an explanation for the situation. She retorts that their connection made it inevitable, whether he requested it or not. Perplexed, Davey seeks clarification, specifically about the stigma etched on his back. She explains that the stigma has now become the vessel containing her soul, which leaves Davey unsettled upon learning that the stigma is the seal of the demon lord. Reluctantly untying her, Davey inquires why she is present when she is supposed to be sealed within a sword. She takes the opportunity to formally introduce herself as Berserk von Fallen, known as the one who peers from the shadows and the demon lord of the abyss. In ancient history, Berserk was the catalyst for the Great War between Middle-earth and the demons. The deity sword Calderas, the very one that Hare's had used to conclude the Great War by slaying the demon lord, concealed a different truth. The demon lord's soul had been sealed within the sword, a fact revealed to Davey by the man who had accomplished this personally. Berserk inquires why Davey appears so bewildered since it seems he already has knowledge of her seal. Then she elaborates that her consciousness remains intact because Calderas wouldn't be so cruel as to imprison a friend's soul. She reveals that she has been transferred to him from Calderas due to the will of the deities and suggests that he takes some responsibility for her. Davey is also the second person to fully utilize the deity's sword. When Davey asks if she means Hare's sword techniques, Berserk notices that he speaks about Hare's as if he knows him well. Davey mentions that Hare's often talked about Berserk whenever he had the chance, which seems to please her. Berserk goes on to clarify that she can't read people's thoughts, but has the ability to borrow the will of higher beings. She clarifies that the small details written in the status windows aren't her thoughts. Berserk expresses her excitement about experiencing a new place and the world through Davey. When Davey asks what he would gain from this arrangement, she points out that he already possesses her abilities. She likens the mechanics to the skills in the games he has seen in his past life, considering it a good deal and looking forward to it. Davey, feeling somewhat unnerved that she knows about his past life, understands that he doesn't have much of a choice. He agrees and shakes her tiny hand with a finger, feeling like he has found someone with whom he can share his secrets. A few days later, the Peristi Dukedom, which would typically be bustling with excitement due to the Continental Sword competition, is instead buzzing with activity because of the sudden attack and the appearance of a stigma. Davey finds himself at the center of it all. Glancing out of the window, Berserk informs him that a crowd has gathered outside once more. Davey is growing increasingly exasperated. It is clear that most of them are just priests who have come to catch a glimpse of the stigma. In the past 300 to 400 years, there have been only 3 saint candidates, making a stigma an exceedingly precious rarity. Davey fears that if this obsession and rush from the people and priests continues, he might end up getting sold to a holy kingdom. In a moment of determination, he goes to Barris and Winley's room, where they are warming up by the fire. He urges them to pack their things immediately. Winley, too, is irritated by the persistent crowd. This place isn't some sacred ground. Davey reasons that when things get complicated, the best course of action is to escape, so they need to hurry. Perched on Davey's briefcase, Perserk inquires if it is truly acceptable for them to leave like this. She is convinced that they will be pursued all the way to their kingdom. Davey, however, assures her that he is fine with that. Meanwhile, Elena is taken aback upon learning that Davey has fled. She clenches her fist angrily on the table and demands confirmation from Linda. She is also frustrated that he shifted all this responsibility onto her and spread bizarre rumors. She does not believe any of these rumors and suddenly stands up, puts her foot on the table, and yells. Her maid, Linda, is taken aback by her unusually aggressive and unruly behavior and tries to calm her down. Elena urges her to instruct the soldiers to prepare and move immediately. Chapter 28. As they continue their journey in the carriage at night, Winley and Barris gradually drift off to sleep. Davey sits calmly, watching over his siblings and feeling a sense of peace. At this moment, Perserk breaks the silence, remarking that he seems to have a significant interest in Calderas. Unlike the current owner of the deity sword, Davey can actually wield it. Davey privately acknowledges that Calderas is a sword that thrives on greed. However, he also knows that he won't be able to use such high-level holy magic again until he fully recovers his power. Perserk suggests that he could forcibly take Calderas from Elena, but Davey dismisses the idea, stating that he wouldn't steal from a child. Moreover, he believes that Calderas isn't the right sword for him. Davey considers himself more of a greatsword user, even though those swords aren't in his possession yet. He has already made up his mind about the swords he wants. Observing his expression, Perserk senses that he is planning something. Davey asks if she doesn't already know, to which she replies that there are parts of his thoughts she can't access when peering into his mind. Perserk then inquires about Davey's plans once he returns home. She points out that his enemies wouldn't be able to move freely in an area where a stigma has been bestowed, making it a prime opportunity to deal with them. Davey responds that he cannot make such a significant decision without proper preparation. While Queen Linus remains unaware, the Varietta dukedom holds a prominent position in the aristocratic faction, boasting many influential members throughout the kingdom. Dealing with them individually will be a time-consuming endeavor. This explains why Queen Linus maintains an outwardly arrogant appearance and can't hastily confront them. However, Davey has devised a solution. Back at the palace, Barris appears before the king, who praises his performance at the competition. The king assures Barris that nothing that had occurred there was his fault, shifting blame onto the Boltus kingdom for their overt actions in front of the alliance. The king emphasizes that Barris's safe return is all that matters. He then turns his attention to Davey, who kneels before him, inquiring about Davey receiving the stigmata. Upon Davey's confirmation, the king expresses his joy and turns to Queen Linus, asking for her opinion. Despite her reluctance, Linus agrees that it is indeed a joyous occasion, putting on a facade of happiness. Davey silently commends her acting skills. The king then addresses Duke Varietta, emphasizing that what transpired at the competition cannot be overlooked and instructing him to draft a formal complaint to the alliance. Following this, the king allows everyone to rest after their tiring journey and requests that Davey stay behind for a private meeting. During this private meeting, as they sip tea, Davey remarks that it has been half a year since his awakening, and the king has not called for him until now. When asked if Davey holds any resentment, he doesn't lie and mentions that the Grand Chamberlain has been watching over him. The king, although he admits to himself that he doesn't deserve the title of father, has indeed noticed Davey's transformation since he emerged from his coma. When asked if he wanted to meet with him during this time, Davey replies that he considered it and adds that he has something specific he wishes to inquire about. In this moment, a memory resurfaces for Davey, one from his childhood when he implored his father for help in saving his mother. He had fervently insisted that it was not an ordinary illness but poison, yet the king had not heeded his pleas. 4 years had passed, and when Davey was 9 years old, he had uncovered the truth about his mother's murderer. However, the king had conveniently evaded the topic, using her illness as a smokescreen. Now, Davey confronts his father directly, demanding to know how it felt to forsake his own wife. He accuses the king of prioritizing the kingdom over his mother and of marrying their enemy. Rather than responding directly to Davey's accusatory question, the king offers advice. He tells Davey that he should strive to become a king himself. The king explains that a ruler often has to make choices that others can't comprehend, and he urges Davey to strengthen himself so that no one can thwart him. It appears to Davey that his father has not entirely forgotten about his mother. However, Davey desires more from him. He wants his father to take responsibility for his actions. In a firm tone, Davey expresses that if being a king means sacrificing one's family for the kingdom's sake, he has no intention of following that path. With a forceful gesture, he slams his palm onto the table, stands up abruptly, and demands that his father give the throne to someone else. Then, without further words, Davey leaves the room. As he walks through a hallway, Berserk, perched on his shoulder, comments on his habit of being harsh. Davey defends his actions, stating that they were necessary and that at least he has obtained an answer. Davey instructs Amy not to allow anyone into his room and retires for the night. Inside his room, he stands on the balcony ledge, arms outstretched, gazing at the city lights below and contemplating whether he should delve deeper into this complex situation. Inside the Black Moon Guild's mansion in the Round Kingdom, word has quickly spread that Sherio has vanished without a trace. Even the assassins who served under her mysteriously disappeared a while ago. The branch leader of the Black Moon Guild in the Brown Kingdom is informed that these assassins were dispatched with a mission to eliminate Prince Davey, Prince Barris, and Princess Winley. In a corner of the room, an odd-looking individual wearing a peculiar hat lets out a laugh. They remark that there was no need for headquarters to send an A-class informant, as Sherio's identity was already shrouded in obscurity. Not only has she vanished, but the princess and the princes are still alive. This person suggests that it might be interesting to witness the true power of an A-class member this time. Standing up, he declares his intent to retrieve Sherio's head along with the bodies of the royal siblings. The branch leader of the Black Moon Guild contemplates the foolishness of the peculiar man's overconfidence, believing that it will ultimately lead to his downfall. Sherio, despite her A-class designation, is exceptionally skilled, and most informants would have recognized her as a formidable and dangerous adversary. The fact that she failed in her assassination attempt and has now gone missing is a highly unusual and precarious situation. As the branch leader contemplates taking a swift leave after clearing up his desk, he suddenly senses that something is amiss. He quickly stands up in alarm, only to hear a voice instructing him not to move. In the next instant, a figure leaps in and strikes him at the back of his neck. The intruder swiftly pins his hands behind his back, prompting the branch leader to turn his neck to get a look. To his surprise, he discovers that the intruder is not a vampire but a human. In a desperate attempt to summon help, the branch leader shouts loudly in order to cause a commotion in the office. However, he soon notices that the peculiar man from earlier and another guild member lie unconscious on the floor. It becomes evident to him that the intruder possesses considerable strength. With growing concern, he asks the intruder who sent him, speculating whether it's the headquarters. The intruder, Davey, sternly warns the branch leader that his life depends on providing valuable information, and it's not something that can be obtained through bribery or negotiation. Desperate to ensure his survival, the branch leader hurriedly agrees to disclose anything Davey wants to know. Witnessing this willingness to cooperate, Davey releases his grip on the branch leader's hands, though they remain in pain from the previous restraint. Davey instructs the branch leader to compile a comprehensive list of all aristocrats who are loyal to the Varietta dukedom, along with records of any embezzlement they have committed. Additionally, he demands information about the strategies and alliances the Varietta dukedom has formed to gain support from others. The branch leader, overwhelmed and fearful, turns to cry out for help, but then he feels a dark, magical energy-infused finger touch his temple. He experiences an intense and overwhelming force, fearing that his death is near. He wonders if Davey is a master assassin, and in response, Davey issues a warning, cautioning the branch leader not to provoke him further. Davey reveals his ability to detect lies, making it clear that attempting to bluff or deceive him would be futile. The branch leader struggles to comprehend how a master assassin could be present in such a small kingdom, but Davey gives him one last opportunity to cooperate. Davey perches on a rooftop, surrounded by several scrolls that lay at his side. As he carefully inspects one of them, he anticipates that there will be fake names and unnecessary information included to hinder his progress. He suspects that the genuine information might be concealed in another office, away from prying eyes. Turning to Berserk, who stands on his shoulder, Davey outlines his plan. Gathering all the information scattered throughout these documents will allow him to dismantle the aristocratic faction that wields power in the kingdom. Perserk suggests that this might turn into a bloodbath. However, Davey clarifies that he has no intention of resorting to mass violence. He believes in playing fair, asserting that even though these individuals are aristocrats, they are not above the law. One particular aristocrat, Marcus Peltras, holds significance in Davey's mission. Marquis Peltras had served as Davey's mother's personal knight when she was alive and was one of the 3 swordmasters in the Round Kingdom. Meanwhile, Marcus Peltras receives a letter, and as he reads its contents, his eyes widen in shock. He hastily exits his office, shouting for his butler to inquire about the sender of this unexpected letter. Davey's ultimate goal is to rectify his family situation and enjoy the simple pleasures of life without constant worry. He envisions a life with a warm back and a full stomach. Furthermore, he aims to strengthen the kingdom by relocating to a small territory owned by the royal family. There, he plans to use the knowledge from his past lives. When Perserk inquires about his revenge, Davey explains that while revenge is part of the process, it's not his ultimate goal. His intention is to seize the throne and transform the country for the better. He already has plans for his palace, indicating that they won't be confined to that small territory forever, and he intends to create a place they can call home. In the grand throne room of the Round Castle, Queen Linus addresses the king with a proposal. She suggests that Prince Davey deserves a reward for obtaining the stigma, which she views as a symbol of pride for their nation. With the king's consent, she continues, stating that Prince Davey had been previously granted a piece of land, and she believes that sending him to that very territory would be the most fitting reward. This way, he can make even greater contributions to their beloved country. Within the hall, hushed murmurs ripple through the courtiers as they find the queen's compliments to the first prince unexpected. Unbeknownst to them, Queen Linus finds this situation detestable. The assassination attempt failed, and her most valuable asset, Sherio, has gone missing. If Davey had returned from the competition without the stigma, she could have easily labeled him as mentally unstable and had him incarcerated. However, the stigma complicates matters. Her frustration is further compounded by the events of the previous night, when all 7 information guilds in the country were attacked and annihilated by a single individual. The branch leader, who had desperately warned her not to seek out the intruder, described this mysterious figure as a master assassin radiating a hideous aura. Deeply concerned about the valuable information held by the information guilds and the potential repercussions of it falling into the hands of the intruder, Queen Linus realizes that they must be prepared for a possible revolution. Although she lacks concrete evidence, her intuition strongly suggests that Marcus Peltras is involved in the chaos within the guilds and is protecting Prince Davey. If her suspicions prove correct, there may still be hope. To counter this, she believes that they must eliminate him from the equation. If neither assassination nor incarceration prove feasible, their only remaining option is to legally banish him. When Queen Linus mentioned the reward for Davey, she did so with the expectation that it would be a difficult proposal for the king to accept. However, to her great shock, the king expresses agreement with her suggestion. He rationalizes that it is indeed improper for an adult prince who is not the crown prince to reside at the royal palace. Eager to proceed, the king calls for the chief and instructs him to bring Prince Davey before the court. Queen Linus can hardly believe her ears at this unexpected turn of events. Facing the king and queen, Davey takes in their proposition and reflects inwardly that he had anticipated this decision. He believes that the king is making this choice because he has come to realize that Davey is like a ticking time bomb, and his continued presence within the royal palace poses a risk. The king's directive is for Davey to leave and begin cultivating the granted land, allowing his presence to shine through his actions. Davey readily accepts this order, recognizing that even if it hadn't been given, he would have left of his own accord since he has completed his objectives in the palace. Davey conveys his intention to depart as soon as he is prepared. Perched on his shoulder, Perserk comments on the twisted nature of the king's heart and how countless lives will be affected by his actions. Inwardly, Davey contemplates that the country may be better off without rulers like this. He sees no need for reform within the nation prior to the next king's ascension to the throne. Davey is determined not to burden Barris with the harsh reality of this kingdom. Some time later, Winley and Barris confront Davey, seeking confirmation that he is indeed departing for the Heinz territory. Barris expresses his intent to create a petition to keep Davey in the palace, but Davey reassures him that he is an adult despite his youthful appearance and has made the decision to leave. Davey holds Barris's hand and asks for his trust, while Winley urges him to inform them if he ever encounters trouble, no matter how dangerous the situation. Davey promises to make the Hines territory prosperous and invites them to join him there in the future. Later, Davey approaches Amy and instructs her to visit the Treasury and Land Management Department to collect all the documents related to the Hines territory. He assures her that if she mentions his name, they will provide her with the necessary documents. Amy follows his instructions, and as Davey begins to walk down the hallway, Perserk comments on his considerable strength and skills, noting that he never becomes arrogant. Playfully, Davey asks if she's living vicariously through his life, engaging in lighthearted banter with her as he proceeds. A while later, Amy brings the requested files to Davey's table, but they are fewer in number than he had expected. When asked, Amy explains that she was told these are all the remaining documents for the Hines territory. Davey, thinking it might be easier to develop this way, excitedly begins to examine the files. As he reviews one particular parchment, Perserk, also reading it, remarks that it seems like a cursed land. She wonders how he ended up with such challenging territory. Davey responds with a laugh at her blunt assessment, secretly feeling rather grateful. With a list of items in her hand, Amy ensures that everything is being loaded into the carriage for Davey's departure. Davey looks back at the castle walls, contemplating his modest exit from the palace. At that moment, Marcus Piltrus arrives and kneels before Davey, addressing him as the kingdom's son. Davey invites him to stand, and as they walk through the palace grounds, Piltrus mentions that he heard about Davey's departure. Davey explains that there was no reason for him to stay, as he is not the designated successor to the throne. Observing Davey's newfound determination, Marquis compliments his growth, suggesting that if the late queen were here, she would be incredibly proud of him. However, when Davey humbly considers himself a disappointment to his mother, Marcus counters, stating that if that were true, then it would be fitting for Marcus himself, who failed to protect Davey's mother, to return to the soil. Davey silently observes Marcus, recalling that he had learned during his infiltration of Marcus's house that Marcus had been discreetly seeking the truth behind his mother's death and gathering incriminating evidence. Marcus Piltrus assures Davey that he is at his service and that he should contact him whenever he needs assistance. Davey jokes about the chaos that would ensue if the neutral Marcus suddenly supported him, to which Marcus responds with a light laugh, emphasizing that not helping would render his oath meaningless. Davey then shares his plans to transform the Hines territory into a livable place and asks Marcus to handle matters in the castle. He's counting on him to shake up the corrupt nobles, as this will pave the way for Davey to deliver the final blow. As the carriage continues on its journey, Davey realizes that the Hines territory is closer to the capital than he initially thought. Perserk is curled up on his leg. A guard on horseback riding alongside the carriage informs him that they will be arriving soon. Upon reaching closer to the Hines territory, Davey sees a sprawling, dusty land situated to the east of the kingdom, adjacent to a mine. It's known as a wasteland territory free of bandits but inhabited by monsters. One advantage is its vast size and location along a key road, which could facilitate regional traffic if the land were normal. However, it's currently considered cursed, an infertile wasteland plagued by eternal drought for the past 5 years, with the reasons behind the drought remaining a mystery. In a status window for the territory, it's noted that the drought is caused by a strange power. Perserk suddenly wakes up and identifies it as a curse, specifically a diffusion curse. This type of curse is characterized by a small medium that spreads endlessly. Davey is surprised to find traces of black magic in the area, and Perserk explains that a resident of the territory must have come into contact with the medium, causing the Hines territory to be afflicted by the curse. Davey attempts to use third-rank purification magic to dispel the curse, but Perserk notes that it won't be easy, especially for curses that have endured for a long time. Currently, the region has no knowledge of black magic, as black magicians have long disappeared and large-scale curses like this have become rare. As the carriage reaches the Hines territory and enters the walled city, they are asked for identification. Davey observes that the security is lacking, but he understands that this place relies on volunteer watchmen to defend against monster attacks. When the guard refuses to let the carriage pass, Davey steps out and instructs his guards not to threaten the watchmen, emphasizing that they are all family now. The watchmen immediately kneel in apology for not greeting him sooner. Davey notices something unusual about the front guard's hands and asks him how long ago their messenger arrived here. The guard, trembling, responds that it has been 2 days. Davey then asks about the timing of the recent monster raid. The guard, surprised that Davey is aware of it, looks up at him in wonder. Davey announces that they'll have to postpone dealing with the curse for now and focus on clearing out the goblins first. Davey learns from Manhwa, who has been entrusted with the position of head of the Vigilant Corps and Region Management, that the goblins have been causing significant trouble in the area. Davey checks Manhwa's status window and sees that he has the potential to be a capable leader. Davey commends Manhwa and the rest of the group for their efforts and announces that, as of today, the Vigilant Corps will be promoted to official guardsman. Manhwa, feeling uncertain about his own abilities, is reassured by Davey, who places a reassuring hand on his shoulder and tells him that he has the skills needed for the job. Davey also mentions that he has the authority to bestow titles as their skills improve. In a study room later, Davey goes over some scrolls with Manhwa and learns that the goblins have managed to infiltrate the castle through incessant invasion attempts, causing destruction and kidnapping residents in the process. Looking out of the window, Davey assesses the situation. When inquiring about their internal affairs, Manhwa informs him that they have sufficient food supplies to last until winter. Deep in thought, Davey contemplates the possibility of using the gifts he received from the royal family. Berserk, reading his thoughts, advises against it, explaining that the funds would barely sustain them for 2 years, even without factoring in the cost of repairing the castle and maintaining the region. Resigned to this reality, Davey tosses a bag of platinum coins onto the table, stunning Manhwa with their value. Davey instructs him to utilize these coins at the Merchants Guild and to mention his name in order to procure the necessary food and materials. While Davey assures them that the money was rightfully acquired, he knows deep down that he essentially looted an informant's guild. Burnil, the head butler of the First Prince's Palace, assures Davey that they will secure all the requested supplies within 4 days. With the logistics sorted, Davey orders that only the minimum number of troops remain to protect the area while the rest assemble for the rescue operation, emphasizing the importance of swift action. Gathering the townspeople along a town square, Davey introduces himself as the newly appointed lord of the region. He acknowledges that during the goblin attack the previous night, residents were captured. Some may be eager to pursue the assailants immediately, while others might be frightened and wish to hide. However, Davey makes it clear that leaving the green dwarfs unchecked is not an option, as they will continue to threaten their land. Davey firmly resolves to eliminate any attackers who have raised their swords against him. When one man voices his concerns, suggesting that taking on the enemy with their depleted forces is akin to suicide, Davey turns to him and demands to know if he'd rather allow the goblins to take over. The man argues that they are the last line of defense protecting their region, and if they fail, the goblins will likely return in anger. Davey's response is simple: they cannot afford to fail, and he personally guarantees his involvement in the battle. Privately, Davey understands that some may view him as a naive young prince driven by his lineage, but he's determined to prove them wrong. Addressing the crowd, Davey emphasizes that he is not just a lord of the Hines region, but also their ruler, their family, and their protector. He vows never to let his family perish and urges them to trust in the marks bestowed upon him by the divine being, the stigmata. If they can't trust him to that extent, then they can at least consider him an oppressive ruler and follow him, knowing that he won't allow a single one of them to die without his permission. Davey's words stir a flurry of thoughts and opinions among the city's residents. Later, as the troops venture into the monster-infested forest, Berserk comments on Davey's speech, acknowledging its effectiveness but questioning what he hopes to achieve with such a small, untrained group of soldiers who are already fatigued. Davey responds confidently, stating that there are 150 of them, and he'll personally take on any goblins exceeding that number. As they come to a stop, a soldier informs the group that they have arrived at their destination. Beyond the ridge lies an abandoned town where many goblins have recently started to gather. He explains that this area was previously unruled territory. An archer in the group, his voice laced with quiet fury, reveals that the goblins have taken someone named Linny. Davey places a reassuring hand on the archer's shoulder and asks if he feels the rage and desire for vengeance. He then turns to the rest of the troop and inquires if they are willing to fight for their fallen comrades. In unison, They all declare their determination for revenge. Davey is pleased to see that the soldiers are outraged not only for their own families, but also for those who are not related to them. He fires a glowing arrow, magically enhanced, which strikes a goblin in the head and creates chaos among the enemies. While hidden behind bushes, the troops express concern about facing the goblins head-on. Davey reminds them that he won't allow a single one of them to die. Davey skillfully fires arrows at the goblins, each shot exhibiting the prowess of his absorbed skills from Apollo, the master archer. Although his shooting style may appear unorthodox, every arrow is far from ordinary. Normally, it would be prudent to engage in guerrilla warfare, utilizing traps and all available resources to deal with the goblins. However, Davey has no intention of tackling the situation in such a tedious manner. Addressing the town's fighters, Davey asserts his authority as their newly appointed lord and family member. He raises his hand, channeling magic to empower each individual, a feat that would challenge even the paladins of the Holy Kingdom of Valsius, requiring a priestess or pope to cast 7th-tier spells. Davey grants them permission to release their pent-up resentment and eagerly orders them to attack. The town's guards and soldiers, motivated by the opportunity for revenge against the goblins, charge forward with expressions of excitement and ecstasy. The battle quickly turns into a one-sided slaughter. When a man is injured, Davey uses his holy power to treat him, and he sternly instructs 2 soldiers not to let anyone die since he hasn't permitted it. Frightened but determined, the 2 men charge back into the fray, unwilling to disappoint Davey. Davey watches the soldiers with a sense of amazement, almost likening their fury to that of a berserker. He can't help but feel a bit sorry for the goblins, given the overwhelming force against them. As the last of the goblins are slain, the soldiers begin celebrating their victory. However, Davey, perched on the roof of a building, interrupts their celebrations. He reminds them that it's too early to celebrate, as they still need to rescue the kidnapped residents. The soldiers quickly refocus on the mission, their excitement undiminished. Davey had initially intended to instill a sense of awe and fear in them, but it seems they are already unnaturally awestruck. Meanwhile, the guards stationed at the city's entrance express concern about Davey's safety, given that he ventured out on a raid with only 10 men. The older guard suggests that Davey might have been blinded by his first taste of victory and lacks a grasp on reality, implying that they should prepare for casualties. Davey and his group return to the city, and he orders the guards to open the barrier and allow them in. The 2 guards are shocked and amazed that Davey was able to defeat the goblin forces with such a small group. As they enter the city, the citizens enthusiastically chant for Davey's long life, and their admiration and loyalty seem almost cult-like to him. Davey addresses the crowd, informing them that there are still goblin villages to clean up and that they will leave some forces behind to guard the region while taking only the elite troops with them. He then dismisses the crowd. Davey is aware that the fervor surrounding him will likely die down in a few days, but he's also aware that rumors travel quickly. He can't help but feel overwhelmed by the fierce adoration and the rapid change in his circumstances. For the first time since he woke up in this world, he begins to regret some of his decisions. Davey reflects on his role as the Lord of the Hines region and remembers the wise words of Astraea, the conqueror of the Palladia Empire on the Board continent. Astraea had emphasized the importance of leading people with their free will, even in small territories. While Davey didn't delve deeply into politics under Astraea's tutelage, he finds these occasional lessons relatable. Sipping tea, Davey discusses the situation with Perserk, who has descended to chat. She suggests that if Davey can remove the curse and govern effectively, the region could return to normal within 5 years and achieve his vision within 20. Davey agrees with her assessment. Perserk mentions several issues plaguing the region, including the lack of an underground water pipeline system, poor crop yields, and a shortage of goods due to agricultural problems. She emphasizes that the large sum of platinum coins he acquired from the Information Guild is a temporary fix, and the main problem is the region's lack of funds. Davey acknowledges that the region's profits have always been minimal. Perserk proposes 3 ways to address these challenges. The first is to utilize the region's capable young people to hunt monsters and animals. The second is to develop unique regional specialties, but this is contingent on resolving the land issues. The third option is trading, though there's no guarantee another city would choose to trade with them since they lack exceptional trade products. Davey suggests they start by surveying the region to determine their available resources and work with what they have. Davey stands on the dry, dusty, and cracked terrain of his newly acquired land, contemplating his situation. He had always dreamed of owning a building, but now he's the owner of farmland that was abandoned by its previous owners. Due to their forfeiture of the land, it now falls under his possession as the lord of the region. Somewhere on this land is the medium through which the curse was placed, but Davey currently lacks the holy energy needed to cast a holy area spell to find it. He ponders the possibility of requesting Princess Alina's help, given her pride in Hare's swordsmanship and her connection to Calderas. However, Perserk advises against it. Realizing they have no other option, Davey decides to take matters into his own hands. He places a hand on the ground and forms a refix curse circle, a type of magic that Perserk hasn't seen before. She explains that this spell was created by Ro-Ias, a magician from a different continent. Curses are complex spells composed of numerous equations and mana arrangements, and dark magicians often require various artifacts or extensive time to cast them. The Refix Curse Circle is a type of magic that supplements these mana arrangements and can help them discover the conditions of the curse, as well as the medium used if all goes well. Davey agrees to give it a try. Davey examines the wall that emerged from the Refix Curse Circle, its digits moving as he touches the screen to fix a potential bug. While scrutinizing the display, he begins to question whether this is truly a curse. Perserk inquires if he has discovered something, and Davey, focused on the screen, responds that it doesn't appear to be a curse, but rather an electric-heated room. Moving to the eastern part of the Hines region, Davey comments on how the border of the territory was distinct. He realizes that the medium has been set up to only encompass the Hines region. Their search has revealed 7 possible locations for the hidden medium, all just barely within the region's borders. Explaining further, Davey clarifies that the medium forcibly determines and sets all natural phenomena related to the weather and atmosphere within the entire region. Perserk grasps the concept a bit and asks if the lack of rain and the dying land are both effects of the curse. Davey confirms this, stating that his debugging efforts have only revealed the curse's impact on maintaining specific conditions. He acknowledges that the term maintenance may not accurately describe the situation, but if this condition persists in a particular region for an extended period, it could indeed become a very dangerous curse. Davey ponders the possibility of controlling, reprogramming, or modifying this curse and its purpose. Davey arrives at a high cliff, and his imagination runs wild with thoughts of transforming this place into a tourist attraction. Using magic to navigate the rocky terrain, he finds himself standing amidst tall pillars that suggest the existence of ancient ruins. Davey marvels at this discovery and realizes that this place likely predates the Great War. He imagines how alchemists and historians would be fascinated by these ruins. However, Perserk raises the possibility that this might be the base of the Dark Mages. Davey acknowledges the concern, but thinks it's unlikely that they are aware of this place. He believes that a dormant ancient curse wouldn't have been recently reactivated. Davey remarks on the eerie silence of the place, and Perserk mentions that there's usually at least a guardian or something in such locations. Just as she says this, a massive stone statue suddenly twitches and comes to life as power surges through it. Davey identifies it as a magic golem and notices that it uses a mana stone as its core. He suspects it possesses some unusual abilities and senses them. In a split second, a powerful energy beam shoots out from the golem, prompting Davey to leap to safety just in time. He lands on top of the golem's head and removes the mana stone from its face. Holding the mana stone in his hand, he excitedly declares that he can actually smell the money. Residents Freeman and Gordon are stationed at their fortress wall check posts, keeping a vigilant watch over the surroundings. They are aware that Davey has left the castle to patrol the land, and Gordon expresses concern about his safety. Freeman, however, is confident that Davey has a plan, especially considering the recent miracle he performed. Freeman finds it surprising how unexpectedly kind Davey has been. In the Ron Kingdom, as the power of the nobles grew, their arrogance also increased. While no nobles were bothersome enough to venture to their remote region and torment the residents directly, the inhabitants still received letters from those who had moved to neighboring areas. The kingdom had largely neglected their crumbling region for far too long. Then, out of the blue, they sent a young boy as their supposed lord. The adults in the town speculated that he must have lost a political battle and been banished here. They feared that such individuals might vent their frustrations on the residents. While anxiety was palpable among the people, they were also realistic. Goblin attacks had been relentless, leaving them with little luxury to worry about anything else. Inevitably, the goblins breached their fortress walls and even kidnapped some of the residents. At that time, their limited forces couldn't mount a rescue mission. The situation was dire, and just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, Davey arrived. He was both the first prince of the kingdom and the new lord of the Hines territory. When he appeared with a smile on his face, the residents were unsure of what to expect. Some fear he might punish the captain of the voluntary civilian corps after learning about the region's troubles. There were even individuals who swore they would rebel against him if he took such actions. However, Prince Davey surprised everyone. He examined the region's problems closely, devised a plan to outmaneuver the goblin ambush, and provided the residents with a chance for revenge. He referred to them as family and performed a miraculous rescue of the kidnapped inhabitants. Though he grumbled that he was no saint, in just a few days, he had become more than a hero to the residents, even surpassing the status of a deity. Despite the prohibition on religious dissent, it was doubtful that anyone would dare to defy his newfound influence. As Freeman and Gordon work on the fortress wall, covering cracks with plaster, Gordon asks Freeman if there is any hope for the region. It has been a long time since the majority of the area has turned into barren lands due to several years of drought. Even the vicinity around the castle, the only place that still receives rain, is beginning to be affected. Several priests, magicians, and alchemists had come to investigate, claiming to do so for research purposes, but they all eventually gave up and departed, shaking their heads. They concluded that this was not a problem humans could solve. In Gordon's view, the issue of the prolonged drought might not be easily solved by Davey, as it seems as though they are cursed by the skies themselves. Spirit stones, naturally condensed chunks of highly concentrated mana, held an immense amount of power compared to regular mana stones of the same size. Davey excavates these precious stones from the golem's debris and contemplates their potential value. Throughout the continent, spirit stones were typically found in small quantities, often discovered within ancient ruins. Even in these cases, they commanded high prices, selling for several hundred gold coins each. Purser cautions Davey about selling them without a well-thought-out plan, as the consequences can be unpredictable. As Davey ventures deeper into the heart of the area, he encounters large crystals joined together. He quickly realizes that these crystals form the core of the curse, and their release into the world can potentially lead to chaos and even wars between nations. Davey examines their purity closely and touches them, contemplating the immense magical energy contained within. If he could harness this power, he might be capable of casting ninth circle magic spells. Davey begins to work on deciphering the intricate coding of the crystals, forming a magic circle over them. As he delves into the intricacies of the code, he marvels at the sheer effort and complexity put into this curse, especially for the seemingly simple purpose of drying out a region. It raises suspicions that there might have been more to this land than meets the eye. Davey focuses on understanding the algorithms behind the code, as he believes that once he deciphers them, he can make modifications to the curse. As Davey immerses himself in deciphering the intricate code, a swirling whirlpool of coded figures materializes around him, with an energy core at its apex. Gradually, this intricate coding condenses into a radiant spark of white light, casting an emerald glow that envelopes everything. The binary code flows around him as he works on the modifications. Surrounded by this green luminescence, Purser can't help but inquire about the changes Davey has made. Davey, removing his jacket, casually replies that since the people of the region have suffered through years of drought, he thought it would be a kind gesture to grant them a little rain. He then collects the spirit stones, bundling them up in his jacket and slinging it over his shoulder. Back at the fortress, astonishment grips everyone, including Gordon and Freeman, as the sky above them begins to pour rain. People come out onto the streets, their expressions filled with wonder and amazement as they marvel at the unexpected downpour. During a gathering of the town's nobility, the situation is deemed dire and seemingly insurmountable. It appears that they are on the brink of fading away, similar to what happened to Duke Paltris. Despite their collective efforts, they find themselves at a loss, unable to devise a strategy to evade the mounting evidence against them. Some lower-level nobles have already been purged at the first opportunity, which in turn prompted others who had been biding their time to emerge. To the nobleman's growing frustration, it seems that the queen's response is to let the situation escalate without any attempts at mitigation. Rumors about Prince Davey's stigma circulate, but many still regard him as an inexperienced youth who cannot harness holy power effectively. Furthermore, Davey's stigmata is said to have manifested at an unusual location and is deemed unstable. Since the Holy Kingdom faces similar predicaments, they are unlikely to offer Davey their support. Among the nobility, Marcus Aurelius holds the belief that the queen has lavished too much attention on the half-blood prince, diverting it from more deserving figures like the king and Marcus Paltris. However, Duke Variata counters Raltis' perspective, asserting that they have no choice but to stand and fight, even if it means bloodshed. Reluctantly, the other nobles begin to concur, acknowledging that they need to strategize to recover the classified information. In the worst-case scenario, internal conflict might be inevitable. Duke Variata instructs Marcus Aurelius to exercise discretion as they proceed with their plan, emphasizing the need to maintain secrecy until they are fully prepared. The Duke personally holds the belief that everyone is underestimating Prince Davey. His decades of experience and keen instincts tell him that there is more to the prince than meets the eye. He understands that if Prince Davey were to gain strength or political influence, he would not hesitate to assert his power. Duke Varietta leaves the meeting and directs his carriage towards his mansion, reassured by the thought that even the prince could do little about the Hind's territory. It is a seemingly hopeless land of death, one that has confounded countless magicians from across the continent. Despite Prince Davey's enigmatic qualities, it is unlikely he can make any significant changes to it. Meanwhile, Freeman returns to the fortress and delivers the news that everything has been resolved. In his private quarters, Davey feels relief wash over him, even though it had taken some time to reach the ruins. It will still be a few days until small crops can be planted again. Perserk expresses surprise that he could gather such specific information from the Spirit Stone, but Davey remains composed. He explains that the Spirit Stone essentially functions as a status board connected to the Spirit Stones planted throughout the region, enabling him to monitor the environmental conditions. Though it is still somewhat unstable, Davey can remotely manipulate its mana arrangement to alter the region's weather. Perserk acknowledges the significant power of the Spirit Stones, and she recognizes the remarkable achievements Davey has accomplished with them. He has decided to use the remaining Spirit Stones to expand storage capacity, at least for the time being. A week later, Davey has gathered a substantial crowd of nearly 60 people who are determined to repay him by helping clear the land. Addressing the assembled group, he explains how he instructed the knights to outline the region's borders the day before. They will all be working for 4 days, with the possibility of time off afterward, depending on their conduct. Many of the townsfolk are skeptical of the 4-day deadline, considering it impossible to achieve, but Davey reassures them, pointing out that the land had once been fertile farmland before the drought, so the basic framework likely remains. Despite their reservations, the townspeople try to gently dissuade him. Monmeter mentions the existing debt owed to Davey from the time they exterminated the goblins. However, Davey proceeds to infuse vitality into everyone present. Approaching him, Monmeter inquires about Davey's plans for planting. Davey responds with a question of his own, asking Monmeter what he thinks a struggling region needs to become successful. There are essentially 2 ways to make money quickly, through abundance or scarcity, or something that satisfies both conditions. Perserk understands Davey's intentions, and as they gaze at the vast farmland, Davey declares his intention to plant moongrass throughout the entire territory. Moongrass, due to its specific requirements for weather, soil, and temperature conditions, cannot be cultivated on the eastern continent. Despite this, it remains a highly sought-after plant imported from the western continent due to its essential use in the research conducted at the Magic Tower and the potion-making processes within temples. It is a commodity sold at a premium, available only in limited quantities, and faces fierce competition in the market, making it a potentially lucrative venture in the agricultural sector. Monmeter, with due respect, points out to Davey that moongrass cannot thrive in their current climate. Davey, however, reassures him, stating that the heavens have blessed them, and therefore, this place would naturally have a favorable climate for the time being. Privately, Davey considers it a matter of adjusting the augmented environment settings. He then tells Monmeter that their next step is to locate the forest-dwelling vegetarians. In a quaint cottage within the Hines region, a female elf peers out of her window as the wind rustles through. She appears to be in the midst of grinding some herbs in her kitchen. This woman is Uriet Helishana, the chief of the Hines region's forest elves. Upon hearing the news of her master Medith's visit through the spirits, Uriah opens her cottage door and warmly greets him. Medith, lowering the hood of his cloak, offers his apologies for arriving unannounced. Uriah assures him that his visits are always welcome and leads him inside, guiding him to the table where she had just been enjoying a cup of tea. As Medith sips his tea, he begins to share a dream he has experienced. Uriah inquires about the nature of this dream, and he explains that it seemed like the spirits had cast a curse upon their beloved forest. With a smile, Uriah gently reminds him that he previously mentioned to her that the work of spirits is simply a part of nature's order, an inevitable and entirely natural occurrence. However, Medith is deeply concerned about the ongoing drought that is afflicting the forest, a problem that seems to be spreading. He urges Uriah to return with him to their hometown, near the sacred tree. Uriah, with calm composure, expresses her belief that she is no longer welcomed in their hometown. Nevertheless, she suggests that he could take the others who are with her so they wouldn't fall victim to the curse placed by the spirits. In an almost indignant tone, Medith emphasizes his worry that she might not survive if she remains in the forest. But Uriah calmly asserts that her fate would merely be a part of nature's orderly course. She holds out hope that there might be someone capable of saving their beloved forest. As a gust of wind blows in through the open window, Uriah interprets it as a sign of impending good fortune. She then asks Medith how he likes the tea and casually mentions that it has been brewed with grasshopper wings. Medith nearly spits it out, momentarily forgetting why Uriah is considered a heretic even among their own people. Enjoying the breeze, Uriah has a premonition that they are going to have a special guest today. Davey and Perserk venture further into the dried forest, and Perserk expresses her surprise at the presence of elves in this desolate place. Elves are an exceptionally rare race, elusive even on continents. Historical records indicate that around 300 years ago, following a significant event, they retreated into hiding, and many people are unaware of their continued existence. Davey shares with Perserk that during their goblin raid, he spotted a few spirits that had come to observe. Where there are spirits, elves are likely to be found as well. Perserk suggests avoiding them, but Davey is unperturbed even if they encounter the elves. When Perserk admits her dislike for elves, Davey confesses to sharing similar sentiments, especially considering the deity of archery, Apollon, had already humiliated the entire elf race. As they arrive at the elves' forest, the scenery transforms into a lush evergreen paradise with reindeer frolicking and butterflies fluttering about. Davey notices that the creatures in this realm seem particularly drawn to him, likely due to his affinity with spirits. Perserk observes their fondness for him with a touch of jealousy and inquires about Davey's plan for finding moongrass. Just then, a small insect-like creature resembling a flying insect approaches Davey with a seedling and places it delicately in his palm. Davey thanks the creature and gently pats it with a finger, while Perserk examines the seedling and questions whether it is moongrass. Davey confirms. The tiny insect acts as their guide, leading them to the moon deity's garden, where Davey marvels at the extensive moongrass fields. He thanks the insect for its guidance, and as Perserk surveys the area, she remarks on the abundance of moongrass, more than enough for them to plant throughout the region. As she turns back to Davey, she notices him casting a spell that has enveloped the moongrass in a soothing green glow. We really hope that you enjoyed this manhwa. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.